It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
What is up, everybody? This is One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I am your host, Michael Legan, joined alongside by Andrew Gulata. Alex Wolves is our producer behind the proverbial glass. We'll also be joined later by Brij Gotham later on in the show with the headlines. We're taking you all the way up to 2 a.m. on 90.7 FM, YouTube, and Facebook Live. So much to get into tonight. We got Mets, Yankees, NBA playoffs, just a plethora of topics to cover. But first off, Andrew, how are you doing this evening?
Doing great. I mean, after last week, especially with like Memorial Day, and the weather wasn't very good. And now this week, the sun's shining, baseball's out. It's great. Obviously, when the sun's shining in New York, the Mets are on the road. So I feel like that's obviously the biggest thing. Yeah. But baseball, basketball, it's always a really fun time of year, and can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, first off, the Mets may be on the road and may be sunny here in New York, but it's not too sunny for them in San Diego so far. Hopefully that can kind of change up. But like I said off the top, we got a lot to get to. And honestly, I'm doing good, but I think I could be doing a little bit better if it wasn't for the Knicks and how they did in the playoffs this year. And we're going to be talking a lot about that tonight and getting into that. I mean, you know, right off the top, and we're going to have a lot more details to get over, but it's just with the Knicks. And look, this was a great season. I'm very happy about the way this team performed. It was obviously it was their best performance in about 10 years since 2012, 2013. So I can't say I can't knock the season. I can't say it was a failure. But that being said, you know, I had expectations for this team going to playoffs. When you're the 4 seed, you should be making a bit of a run, or at least winning a round. And to see them just lose in 5 and kind of flame out, and now this is it, season's over. I can't deny that I'm disappointed.
Yeah, I think for me, it was a great season, overachieving season, disappointing playoff series, and if that makes sense. And I think, as you said, like once you're in the 4 seed, you expect to win as a 4 seed. You expect to win once you have the home court advantage, especially at the Garden. And the way you went out on Game 5, getting blown out at home, isn't the way you'd want to go out. But I think the Knicks learned a ton about this team in the playoffs, in the regular season as well. And that's going to pay dividends. As always, I think I've been basically saying this since the Knicks were on this little run here since the very beginning of the season. I think all the success is great. And if it stops at a certain point, like it stops here in the first round, I don't think that's the worst thing for this team, you know, because they're just learning so much. You're getting RJ Barrett experience, who's so young, even Julius Randle getting him experience. It was his first playoff series. I know he struggled. Yeah, he didn't struggle. He obviously struggled, did not play very well, but it was only his first series. And to get his feet wet in that series, I think it definitely is important, you know, and then you'll learn more about your depth. You learned a little bit about Derrick Rose. I thought that was a great story early on in the series, and the wheels kind of fell off. But, you know, at the end of the day, the Knicks got outclassed, which, you know, is disappointing when you're the 4 seed, you know, in a 5 seed matchup. You thought it'd be a much closer series, but at the end of the day, I still think it was a great series for these Knicks. It was great to see also MSG just back and, you know, with fans and everything. It was obviously that cool. It was really cool as well. So, again, I think this Knicks team, it's kind of now, where do we go from here? I think that's going to be the big thing.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I totally agree with you with it was great to see MSG back. And, you know, even though I think there were a lot of positives to take out of the series. Well, not a lot, but I mean, you mentioned some of them with Derrick Rose and Taj Gibson. I also think, you know, we have to look at the negative side as well. Obviously, Julius is the biggest negative because, you know, this team was only going to go as far as Randall did. And the fact that he performed so terribly, I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's why the Knicks lost, because in the playoffs, it's about talent. And, you know, it's just when your stars are going to play well, that's what's going to happen. Also, I had some problems with Tibbs, some of the things that he did, but, you know, we're going to get into a lot more of that later. Also, you know, we got the Nets who are going to be, you know, facing off the Bucks in the next round right here. The Brooklyn's big 3. Let's see. I mean, Celtics, they beat them in 5 games. It wasn't that difficult, but now with Milwaukee, this is a better defense. I think it's a more talented team. And the question is, can they make easy work of Milwaukee, or is it going to be more of a contested series?
honestly, I think this Nets team, it's almost unfair at this point, especially in this Eastern Conference. You have three, to me, of top 10 players, top 12 players of basketball right now, all playing on the same team. And also, they also jive really well together. It's not like they're just all playing, their own basketball. They play well as a team. I also like the depth they have. And I know they're going up against, I guess, another big three, if you want to call that, with the Bucks. I don't know if you want to call that I don't call it a big three, but I could understand where you're coming from if you do. We'll see what they do with Giannis, but everyone's saying, oh, the Nets can't guard Giannis. I don't know how the Bucks are going to guard KD, Kyrie, and Harden with a really good bench. I don't know. I just don't see it. I think the Nets will do very, very well in this series.
Yeah, I mean, first off, Brook Lopez revenge series. I mean, can we see a little bit of some revenge there? I mean, I don't know. Brook isn't, what he was, but yeah, like you said, I mean, we're going to get more into this later, but I just don't see, like, I know Milwaukee has a stellar defense. I know that Giannis is obviously a freak athletically. Obviously, I mean, Drew Holiday, and they have a great, they have a pretty deep team. But I don't see how they can shut down KD, Harden, Kyrie every night for at least 4 games in a 7-game series. At least one every night. At least one of them's going to go off. It's impossible. I mean, I think it's debatable. I mean, look, they haven't even won a title yet, but we can even get into the discussion of. I mean, if you want to compare this to other big threes of the past, like LeBron, Wade Bosch, or, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, or stuff like that, or even like LeBron AD, like, I think it's debatable, Steph and KD and Clay, like, I think it's debatable if this is maybe the most talented big three we've seen, but, a lot to cover there. And then, we're going to definitely talk more Knicks Nets in our next segment. And also, as I mentioned before, a little bit later in our first hour, Brij Gotham will be bringing us some headlines, specifically some baseball headlines, which, for you and me, we love baseball. It's going to be great. Obviously, first off, one of the big headlines, the Yankees are struggling offensively, which as a Mets fan, let's be honest, I love to see, but hey, Yankee fans out there, I know how it feels. I know how it is to see a team struggle offensively. Also, the All-Star Game ballot is now live. So, all of our local fans start voting, maybe vote for the Mob Squad, maybe get some votes in for Garrett Cole. We'll see we'll talk a little bit with Brij about who we think should be the New York representatives for the All-Star Game. And of course, also, we got to talk about the recent buzz regarding pitchers and foreign substances. Of all those baseball headlines, I think they're all intriguing, but which one stands out the most to you, Andrew?
Oh, that doctored baseball one, I think is really interesting. I don't know if you read the Sports Illustrated article, but I read
parts of it. But
it was a really long article, which, I mean, it took me to get through all of it. I mean, definitely took me a little bit, but it was fascinating. I mean, just say like 80% of the league probably does this, and how they think it's the new steroids, which would be, I mean, kind of crazy. Everyone's talking about like moving back the mound and how that would switch it, or maybe it's the approach of the hitters. What if it's the pitchers? And I think that would be, I mean, interesting. It's something that I think you have to talk about. And it's kind of just like, right now, it seems like no manager is going to call the other manager on it, because they know the opposing pitcher is probably using it, or their pitcher is using it. Like 80% of the league, that's a lot of pitchers. And like, even like, as a Mets fan, a lot of people were talking about Yu Darvish just a few days ago, if he was using it. And like Luis Rojas, he even said, he was like, oh, I didn't know about it, or like whatever. Now, who knows if that's true? Not, we don't really know. But this could be something that I think MLB has to look at. And I think it's a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's obviously a lot of talk locally, even with Garrett Cole with the foreign substances, but, we'll break a bit down to that later. And of course, Andrew, you mentioned the Mets. With both of us here tonight, this show would not be complete unless we had a lengthy Mets discussion. Of course, the team continues to be through injuries. Honestly, I could do the whole show about the Mets, but, we got to be fair to the other teams and the other stories. But, Pete Alonso, Kevin Pillar, they've been back now for a few games, but now Jonathan VR has a hamstring issue. He pinch hit last night or the other night, but, McNeil and Ford are going to be out till July. So much to talk about there. I mean, I just, a lot to cover with the Mets. And then quite appropriately, after our Mets segment, we'll be joined by Jeff Mangold, the former head strength and conditioning coach for both the New York Mets and New York Yankees. Jeff spent 4 years with the Mets from 93 to 96, and he also spent a total of 14 years, with the Yankees over 2 different stints with the team. He was with the Bronx Bombers during the dynasty years of the late 90s. He worked with Mo, Jeter, Pettit, so many other icons. Just some great insights from Jeff. I don't know, Andrew, what kind of stood out to you when we talked to Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I just think the whole conversation was really fascinating. I thought it was interesting how he was talking about like how basically strength and conditioning has evolved over, the last 30 years, I guess, whatever, 40 years. And I think that's just, to kind of think about, like, I think everyone kind of talks about it, how the old athletes would never be able to compare with the athletes today. And it just shows you how different everything was, how obviously now there's these grand facilities that players work out in, and everything's so meticulous to either like hit the home run ball or do whatever they, each player does best. And before, like, they were working out in basically like janitor's closets.
Yeah, that was
it's kind of it's definitely interesting to see how quick it happens over just a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, that was what you just mentioned, how we kind of talked about, the teams only had one weight room, and they had to both teams had to share it, and just some great insights from Jeff. Also, he talked a little bit about, kind of the way that you saw in like the core four, for example, how they trained, and some good stuff about Torrey as well. Just a great interview. So I can't wait for you guys to hear that. And then in our final hour, Brij is going to come back. He's going to bring us some more headlines. We're going to be talking about Coach K's retirement. Honestly, I was a little shocked about that. I didn't really see that one coming personally. And then, of course, the dramatic shakeup in the Celtics organization, Danny Ainge stepping down, Brad Stevens moving up. I think that's a little bit, kind of interesting, weird thing to debate. And then, the last thing that we're going to talk about with Brij in the final headline segment, the last time I was on the show, we talked about Tim Tebow. And once again, we'll be talking about a polarizing former college football quarterback who failed in the NFL. But this time we'll be talking about Johnny Manziel. And Johnny had some rather interesting things to say about how he made some money under the table while in college. Now, of course, we hear about this stuff all the time, but of course, coming from Johnny, he said it only the way Johnny could.
Oh yeah. Hey, like it was funny because that Tim Tebow, how you said the last time you're on the show, he actually, like, I listened to the interview, and he said how he always goes to like the Heisman ceremonies now, how they're able to have the past winners, and he stands next to Tim Tebow, which is like the biggest, the polarizing opposite people. Yeah, which I thought was really funny. And yeah, Johnny talking about, it's just interesting, his whole college career. And that's like, for him, that was obviously the apex of his football career. But it was definitely interesting to see, with the autograph stuff. And, obviously it goes into now with, it seems like the rules are starting to shift. And it was just, it was interesting to see, one of the best college football players of our generation, even go into this and stuff like that. It was definitely interesting.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if I were Johnny, be coming out and saying this stuff so brashly. He did joke and saying, like, what are they going to do? Take away my Chick-fil-A bowl win or whatever? Yeah. I was like, all right, Johnny.
He said he never did it in the Heisman year.
Well, that's just totally, why would he do it in the year when he was like the most popular? Sure. That's ridiculous. But we'll get more into that later with Brij and, all the other headlines that he's going to be bringing us in our final hour. And then also in our last hour, we're going to be talking about Naomi Osaka, who, of course, withdrew from the French Open, this past week. She released a rather powerful statement, I thought, saying how she'd been struggling with some mental health issues, and her decision, to withdraw because of her battles with mental health really shed a light on the fact that, at the end of the day, athletes are people too. I think a lot of times we forget that. We put them on a pedestal. We like, oh, these are gods, more or less. And, we got to remember they're just like you and me. They just, just really good at sports. So now there's a lot of talk going on now about, how we as media, we as fans treat athletes. And I think it's just a really important discussion to have.
No, yeah, for sure. And, I think that some of the questions, and I think the media, fans are also, I think, guilty of this. It's just like, sometimes you feel like when you ask questions, you're not asking it to someone that, obviously does the exact same things as every other human being. And I think people are obviously more critical of athletes and just a fan, just of being a fan. It's just different. I think everyone knows that. And to shed light on that, I think is, important, and maybe ways to move forward and that stuff. So definitely interesting. And it's just, it's such a dynamic that you don't see, I don't think, really anywhere else in life, I guess, with like other celebrities and that stuff, but just like, I guess the whole celebrity culture in general, it's interesting to see how, some people, they just get so high up on a pedestal that people feel entitled to ask certain questions that may, obviously bring stress or whatever. And then Naomi Osaka definitely shed light onto that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have a really good discussion there. And then finally, we're going to wrap up tonight's show with a lengthy NBA playoffs discussion. So much to get into. Lakers eliminated, Damian Lillard and Devin Booker going off in the playoffs. Can the Hawks do any damage against the Sixers? Of course, the Clippers staving off elimination. Just a lot to break down there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, the NBA playoffs, especially like now in the NBA playoffs, because we're not exactly like towards the end. Now we're, still in the thick of it. And I feel like the NBA playoffs, they kind of last forever.
They do.
And I mean, obviously you have a ton to talk about with all these stars. And I think it's fun about the NBA when you get to this time, because obviously the best stars are shining. And I mean, it'll be interesting to see, talking about, the Lakers getting knocked out, the Clippers, Game 7 will be interesting to talk about that. The Hawks, who beat the Knicks, now where do they go from here, with the Sixers and Embiid in that situation? It should definitely be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, first off, let me just tease a little bit. My fellow Knicks fans, don't worry. I do not see the Hawks doing any damage against the Sixers. This is not gonna. It's obviously about Joel Embiid, but even with Ben Simmons in that team, I don't know. I don't think I wouldn't worry too much about the Hawks getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. But that's what we got going on tonight. We got a lot to break down. It's going to be a fun show. Next up, Andrew and I are going to be talking Knicks, and Nets exclusively. Combine the two right there, and we're going to do a little bit of a season recap, do a little bit of a preview for the Nets. But first, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to One on One.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Michael Legan here, you there, in the words of the great Steve Summers. Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm here with Andrew Gulata, rocking with you on this Saturday night. And let's start off our first segment. We got to talk Knicks because also, to quote another FAN host, I got the pulse of the people. And I know that New York right now, we want to talk Knicks because let's be honest, I think there's a lot of New York fans, a lot of Knicks fans out there who still are kind of trying to assess this season, trying to assess this playoff performance. And there's a lot to break down, and player-wise, coaching-wise, just so much to get into. But, first off, I want to talk Julius Randle, because obviously that was the focal point of the entire series, in my opinion. I think, Andrew, you would probably agree with that. Just like a disappointing performance, and just there's so much to break down with him specifically. Andrew, what stands out?
So I think it's, obviously Randle, like you said it in the open, but, you got to say it again. He was the motor, the engine of this team. And basically I was saying throughout the whole year when they were 500, when they made on that big run, I was like, this team is going to go where Julius Randle takes it, and that just was the case. And he didn't play a good series, and, he took them to the first round, and that was it. And that's how this team was built. And it worked up until the playoffs. It got them to a 41-31 record, which was great. And again, I feel like with him not playing that well, maybe that was a combination of the Hawks playing really good defense. You got to give them credit for winning the series for sure. And obviously Randle just not playing, so good. I think it's just disappointing. It shows that maybe Randle, I think any star in New York is going to get hyped up a little bit, but maybe, he's not going to be that number one option, probably more of a number three, in my opinion. I just think that's what he's going to be. And again, I feel like this Knicks team and Julius Randle, I think really the Knicks core, in this playoff series was going to have to be Randle, RJ, and probably Derrick Rose, maybe a little Reggie Bullock. And it was really only Rose, and that was really it. And that's not going to win you a series. This is not sustainable. And again, the Knicks, they bet on Randle, they bet on RJ playing well, and it just didn't ends up being the case. I think it's great that you saw that. I think it's great to get that experience. And now, building forward, it's definitely great to have that knowledge compared to, if you didn't.
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, I think the biggest concern, and maybe this is kind of overblowing it, but I can't help but think this way. It's also because I'm a Mets Jeff fan. I'm driven to think this way. Is, we've seen it all the time, and across sports, players have one great year. I mean, Peyton Hillis, Cleveland Browns fullback, going to put him on the cover of Madden. My biggest worry, and I seeing Julius Randle play the way that he did was great. I love to see it this season. I'm not talking about the playoffs, of course. But he was just most improved player, all-star. Like, to see that, and then to come in the playoffs. And here's an interesting stat: since the invention of the shot clock in 1954, only one player has ever taken at least 18 field goals attempts per game while shooting below 30%, and that's Julius Randle. Which is that's how bad he was playing in the playoffs. Yeah. He set an all-time record since 1954. No one has played essentially that bad offensively. For Julius Randle, he basically went from, like I said, an all-star caliber. I think it's debatable. I think some people, I wouldn't have gone this far, but some people are like, oh, is he first team all NBA, second team all NBA? Like, which I think first team is a little absurd, but like, to go from that kind of discussion, there was MVP talk, all this, to basically go out there and play like a G League player. I mean, he almost had as many turnovers as assists, like, for the entire series. I mean, I don't think it was possible. I mean, I guess one way to look at it is, let's say the Knicks come back next year, he plays well again, they make the playoffs again. It'll be impossible for him to play any worse next time. So the bar will be so low, the pressure will be off. But it just, to see him play that way, it's just so disheartening. And I'm sorry, it's just creeping into my head. Do we have an R.A. Dickey, a Peyton Hillis, like a 1-year wonder situation in my head? We won't know until next year, but it's just, I can't help but be disheartened.
Yeah, I mean, I think people were talking about this. Kind of the negative is that he had this great season with no fans, and then once the fans started to come back, the playoffs, they have more fans. Didn't play as well. Now, I don't know if that's the case or not. He did say, I think in game 1, that the fans were just so electric that he was like, all his energy was gone by halftime. Like, I don't think it's the case. This may be his best year of his NBA career, because he had a really good year. I mean, 24 points, 10 rebounds, 6, like, that's an amazing year. And he may never get back to that point. I think, he's still going to be like, I don't think he's a 1-year wonder per se. I think he could be a really solid, as I said, a number 3 guy, maybe a number 2. I think the Knicks, if they can upgrade, if you can get like an all NBA great star and replace Randle, I mean, I think you do, but if not, you kind of have to, bring him back, give him the long-term deal, especially, maybe you pair him up with someone else, and maybe he's not the only vocal point of your team. You're hoping RJ Barrett, who, look, in his second year, 17 points a game, definitely didn't play it in the playoffs, but, overall, I think he did take a step forward, and he's going to obviously, I think, continue to grow. It's just like, I think so the question is like, who you bringing in, with Randle or replacing Randle, like whatever it is. And that's something that's going to be interesting. I don't think, though, the 1-year wonder, like, I definitely get where you're coming from. And especially like, he may not, be this good. He may not be this good. And just like, R.A. Dickey, he's not going to win the Cy Young again. Like, but like, I still think he could be, that 3, maybe that 2. I mean, look, I think he had probably an overachieving season, when you just look at the rest of his career, or maybe he'll continue to get better. I mean, we'll just have to see, but it's definitely like that playoff. So he was a different player. And that was really surprising. You thought that he was coming into his own as a star, and the Knicks, if they won this series, it was going to be because of Randle and all that stuff. And it didn't happen. And I also don't want to overreact, because it's 5 games at the end of the day. It's 1 series. You don't want to make a guy's career off of 1 series. So again, I think it's just going to be interesting going forward. I think that the Knicks probably will end up bringing him back. I think they'll try to pair him with someone else. I don't think they should go out and like desperately do that. And I think that's going to be the big question for them going forward, is that, how, like, a lot of teams are promising or were promising, like the Knicks, and then something happens and it just doesn't work out. I think it's going to be interesting. Will the Knicks be patient? Will they try to be desperate and try to pair Randle with a star? Will they just throw money at Randle, and that will be that? And then they just hope RJ gets better. I don't know. It's very, very interesting. And again, going forward, it's like this Knicks team, they built an amazing foundation, amazing, bedrock, but now it's time to build up.
Yeah. I mean, first off, at least Knicks fans, I think Julius is still better than Kristaps. So I think it's kind of a wash there. So I agree. I think it's now about kind of, can you bring in another star? I think Julius, even at the end of the day, he was great in the regular season, but I don't think he was ever the alpha. Like, I don't remember think he was going to be like an elite the best player in the game. You need to pair him up with another star. The question is, who's that going to be? We'll talk a little bit later when we get to our NBA segment about Damian Lillard. But of course, the conundrum comes here where if you're going to try to sign someone like Kawhi, you could do that. But, I think the more intriguing options are out there for a trade. But that being said, if you want to trade to get someone to pair with Randall, you're going to be giving up all the young pieces that you want to keep around. You're going to have to give up quickly a Toppin, a RJ Barrett, who I don't want to give up. I don't want to give up these guys. So it was a really kind of like sticky, tricky situation. I think, honestly, if I were the Knicks, I would not make any dramatic trades right now or in the offseason. I would focus on, let's try to sign some guys. Don't re-sign Alfred Payton. I'll tell you that. Do not re-sign him. I would re-sign Derrick Rose. I think, I don't see him as a starter, but he was a 6th man of the year finalist, great off the bench. Maybe even re-sign Taj Gibson. I know he's older now, but I talk about a guy. We're giving props to Derrick Rose for this series. I think Taj Gibson, there's a lot of props. First off, Clint Capella had him size-wise the whole series. I mean, he's younger, he's bigger, he's faster, but Taj still gave him a fight for the most part. Even on the other guys, he played well defensively. But just, in terms of some other things about the series that were just kind of like disappointing. Number one, the Knicks had a top 3 defense in the regular season, and they looked lost out there defensively this entire series. I mean, they had no answers for Trey. They had no answers for Capella. It kind of also showed how much they missed Mitchell Robinson, I think, just the fact that they don't have this young athletic guy at center position. The defense got badly exposed. Also, Knicks fans were celebrating crazy, shutting down New York City after that Game 2 win. Let's be honest. The reason the Knicks won a game was because the Hawks were putrid offensively that game. And I don't think it was the Knicks defense there. I think it was just the fact the Hawks couldn't hit any shots. Like, whenever the Knicks kind of got in these games, it was just because the Hawks couldn't do anything. It wasn't because the Knicks were playing really well. And that in and of itself is disheartening. The fact that when my team was in it, it was because the other team was playing well, because they were so great. And I said it off the top, and I say it here, at the end of the day, playoffs are about talent. Effort in the regular season is only going to get you so far. It's not going to work in the playoffs, because I think in the playoffs, everyone tries. If the talent can kind of go 50% coasting in the regular season, become playoff time, they're going to go 100%. And, your low level guys who are always trying, it's not going to work anymore. So I'm curious to see where the team goes from here. Also, I'm curious what you thought of Tibbs in this series, because from my point of view, to be honest, I thought you had a terrible series, coaching wise.
Yeah, like I want to make a few points. If like you were talking about Trae Young and like how they couldn't defend him, I don't think there's a point guard on this team to defend him, to be honest with you. I mean, Derrick Rose, and I think Derrick Rose, great offensive player. I liked him on the second unit better, and I know you had to kind of start him just because how putrid Alfred Payton was. But I think Derrick Rose was so good on that second unit. First of all, kept him just not playing 45 minutes a game, which is obviously a big help. And I think he brought just that energy to that second unit. And, you talk about how the Hawks went cold, there in that second half. Also, I think early on in that series, the Knicks bench was a huge difference with Rose, and they made a difference. Like, every time they came in, the Knicks came back in the game. And I think that early in the series, that was kind of how the Knicks were staying in games. They started in game 1. It was the jump start to game 2, along with the Hawks not shooting well. And then, and then that was kind of it. Then game 3 hit, Rose started, and then like they'd have a good push in the beginning, then they'd fade down the stretch because the bench just wasn't the same with Rose. So like I would also love to keep him, as that 6th man, but I think you have a huge hole at point guard. And I would like them to fill it in. I think free agency is kind of where you could do it. There are a lot of, vet guards. You talk about Kyle Lowry, talk about a Mike Conley, CP3. I think he'll re-sign with the Suns, but he is technically, out there. I believe he's like a player option, which again, I think that's a huge hole at the Knicks with which they're going to have to, fill there. And then Tibbs, again, I just feel like, he didn't have the best series. I think coaching the NBA, kind of only takes you so far. Like this whole year, he just leaned on Randall. He leaned on his best players, and it came to the playoffs. That didn't happen, and he didn't have an answer for it, which I don't know if you can blame on him or, the players, or just to the Hawks playing well and stopping Julius Randle. I mean, I think coaching only, as you said, coaching and all that stuff only gets you so far. And I think Tibbs, he's kind of known for overachieving the playoff or overachieving in the regular season, playing really good in the regular season. And then in the playoffs, they lose. You know, you talk about even those Bulls teams, they never even made a finals. So again, I think with Tibbs, I think the Knicks did a great job. They built the foundation and they got to, keep that, going forward. And I think you keep Tibbs until, maybe you're at that level where you feel like you can win a title. And that was my whole thing with Tibbs. If he can build the foundation, get you ready to win a championship, that's his job here. And, we'll see, if the Knicks would keep him after that or not. But again, he did such a good job in the regular season. It definitely was a little disheartening to see, the Knicks just get completely outplayed really in this 5-game set.
Yeah. I mean, with Tibbs, I think the most frustrating thing for me was like we both said, it can only take you so far, but he was just the coaching. But he's just so stubborn. Like, he wasn't until game 3 that he finally took Elfrid out of the starting lineup. And, you talk about how he relied on Randall all season, the Knicks and, people used to get on Carmelo for this all the time, but like, let's be honest, like the whole offense, not the whole offense, but a lot of the offense in the regular season was through Randall. A lot of isolation, a lot of like, okay, Julius, like everyone will draw out.
He's got to make the right passes,
and it's just like the whole series, the Hawks were double teaming Randall. They were getting to him, stopping him from getting to the paint. And it just seemed that like, and maybe you can say this on Randall for not like getting flustered and for not seeing the open passes and stuff, but like, it just felt like there was no offensive adjustment from Tibbs' part. Like, okay, guys, you're going to double team Randall. Let's do this. I just didn't see that. And also like, Quickly and Toppin, I know the rookies, but whenever they got in the game in the playoffs, they provided a spark off the bench. Like it was, especially in, in game 5, like when they got in there, obviously the Knicks were down, but you felt a little bit of life. Okay, hey, maybe we have a shot here. And then he almost just threw them right back on the bench. And it wasn't really reading the pulse. And also, like you said, I think Derrick Rose is better off the bench. And, I get it because you can't start Elfrid Payton. But
maybe start like Frank or something.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. I mean, I know Frank's like a meme now. I know it's kind of like an inside joke. I like Frank, but let's be honest. Frank is one of your best defenders. And part of the reason why he didn't stop Trey in game 1 is because he was ice cold off the bench. If you start Frank in this series, and I'm not saying he's got to play a lot, at least get him warmed up so that when he comes in later in a defense situation, he's warmed up, he's ready to go. It's just why that never crossed Tibbs' mind. Look, I'm not some NBA coach. I played rec basketball, played travel basketball in 5th grade. I don't really know what I'm talking about. But that being said, like it surprised me that wasn't really a thought. And also another thing with Tibbs, and we're going to touch on the Nets here a little bit before we move into our next segment, just to be fair to the 5 Net fans that exist. The Tibbs, the question is, you hear all this talk, you saw like with Jimmy Butler and everything, like, does a star want to play for Tibbs? That's another thing to think about. Like, he's known for riding his guys into the ground. Like, heavy minutes. He's an old school coach, which I like. But in today's NBA, it's all about player coaches. Is that going to work?
I think that he's going to bring them to a point. I think it's going to be like the Nets, kind of, with what they did, And maybe that's not fair to Tibbs, or maybe, maybe they'll try it with Tibbs, and if it doesn't work out, then they'll fire him. I just like these types of coaches, Doc Rivers is another one like these, they're probably the better coaches if you think about it, but you have to manage stars, and stars have to play, for certain coaches. You're kind of seeing it with Dame, which, they're, Portland fired Terry Stotts, and now, it's kind of going to be Dame, making that decision kind of, which will be, interesting to see, how they go. And just like, I don't know if Tibbs can bring this team to the promised land. That was all my whole thing from the beginning. I don't think he will. I think he's going to pass it on to someone that, will kind of help manage these stars. I do think that's kind of the way the NBA is going. We're seeing it with the Nets, with Steve Nash, kind of that, former player, understand how stars work, was a star in his own right, So I think that's kind of where the Knicks probably will end up going if this all works out. To me, I just think the Knicks, and they showed it this year, they have the Nets blueprint, kind of. Get, these young players playing well, build a culture. The Nets did that. And they didn't even win a playoff series. They won one playoff game, in the 2 years that they built it. And then they brought KD and Kyrie. So it will be interesting to kind of see how this, kind of jives and works out. And, for all the teams that end up like the Nets, they're teams that, don't end up very good. So again, it'll be interesting. The Knicks really do have this fork in the road.
Yeah. I mean, also, with you mentioned, I do think it's very similar to what the Nets went through when you said it a few years ago. I think Tibbs is a better coach than Kenny Atkinson, so I wouldn't just get rid of him.
Sure.
But it's an interesting thing to talk about. But just mentioning the Nets, let's just briefly here touch on the Nets. who are going to be facing the Bulls and the Bucks. That'd be interesting if it was the Bulls. That'd be kind of funny. The Bucks in the next round. I think it'll be a tighter series than it was against the Celtics. We mentioned off the top, look, Milwaukee is a great defense. They had a top 10 defense this year. Honestly, I think that when it comes down to it, the only contenders in the East are, Milwaukee, Brooklyn, the 76ers, Milwaukee even shaky, and with Joel Embiid torn meniscus, like the cartilage tear, are they even really contending? Like, is this the Eastern Conference Finals? Like, if Joel can't come back, is the winner of this series really the team that's going to get to the finals?
It probably is because it's going to be the Nets, and then the Nets are going to win. Like this Nets team, like you could say that there are a few finals ready teams like the Sixers and like the Bucks, whatever. But the Nets are a class above them. I just really honestly think they are. Looking at what they do, it's just. It's really unfair. Like, you look out of the 4 to 5 games against the Celtics, they scored 119 or more. 120 points. Like, that's a lot of points to score, basically every night. It's too crazy. You talk about the Bucks being, this top 10 defense. Like, the Knicks were a top 10 defense and they played against the Hawks and they couldn't stop Trae Young. Like, I think at a certain point, stars beat defense, good offense beats good defense in the NBA, especially I think today's NBA with all these stars, especially for the Nets. I just think, it's the Bucks are a step lower. They're just a step down at the end of the day. And I think the Nets really will take advantage of that. I think KD will, Kyrie, Harden, and the Nets will lean on him. And I think they'll get it done.
Yeah. Well, first off, my biggest concern with the Nets, and I mentioned it kind of off top a little bit, was, how are they going to stop Giannis? In the regular season, basically what happened was Brooklyn was kind of like daring him to shoot outside, and he was making those shots. And I think in the playoffs, he'll be even more amped up. He'll be even more ready to go. Also, Milwaukee tended to go against Brooklyn a little bit small. They would play Giannis at the 5 sometimes against Brooklyn, and that means DeAndre Jordan is guarding him, which is not good for anybody. And also, if KD's got to guard Giannis,
it's good for Giannis. Though.
It was good for Giannis, yeah. If KD has to guard Giannis in a more traditional lineup, that's even better for him. So I don't really know how they can stop Giannis. But that being said, and we both said it kind of multiple points, Brooklyn's big three is just. I can't see like 4 games where you could stop all 3 of them. That's the only way to beat them is you got to stop all 3 of them. And to ask a team to do that for 4 games is just, I just don't see that happening. Brooklyn's big three combined to average 85 points among the 3 of them in the Boston series. They scored combined 104 points in the elimination game when they defeated Boston. It's just the whole. They're a juggernaut. It's the simplest way to say it.
They play so well together too. It's just like, it's honestly, I don't think you can create a better team in 2K. Like I used to play franchise in like 2015, 2016, back, when I was in high school, and you try to put KD, Kyrie, and Harden all on the same teams. Even had Blake Griffin. You had the veterans there as well.
I think old 2K might have been harder to add Blake Griffin. Now you can
exactly, yeah, no, for sure. But I would always go like 5 years down the line. I'd always build the Knicks up to be good, and I'd always add old Melo. Like that's just kind of how it reminds me of. But I think this Nets team, they're at some point, it starts to be a little unfair just how good these guys are. It's not only the talent, the way they play together, the way they mesh. Again, you're not outscoring them, so you're gonna have to stop them. I just don't see the Bucks doing it.
Yeah, well, I think that's gonna do it for our Knicks and Nets talk for now. But don't go anywhere because next up we're gonna be joined by Brij Gotham to talk some baseball headlines. But first up, we're gonna take a quick break. You're listening to One on One.
on One has a brand new YouTube channel. Subscribe to WFUV Sports to catch our simulcast Saturday nights and get notifications so you never miss another show. Miss the show? You can find on-demand segments, interviews, and highlights every week. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I am Brij Gotham, and I have you covered with the latest headlines. Let's start with the Yankees, who are in the midst of a 3-game set against the Red Sox. Now, prior to the series, the Bronx Bombers were 4.5 games out of first place in the AL East, but the Yanks had also dropped 7 of the last 10, and their offense is struggling to find their groove. WFUV sports alum Michael Kay perfectly summed up what's wrong. He noted that although the pitching has been a pleasant surprise, the team cannot rely on that to make a deep run in October. Essentially, if they don't start hitting, they're really not going to win. And injuries have also plagued the Yanks this season. Mere days after tossing a no-hitter, Corey Kluber suffered a shoulder injury, which will sideline him for at least a few weeks. Zach Britton and Luke Voigt remain on the IL, and Aaron Hicks is most likely out for the season. But even when healthy, the Yankees simply aren't hitting well. The back half of the lineup is batting under 200, and the power hitters have been inconsistent at best. So, fellas, can the Yanks fix their broken offense? And if you're Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman, what moves are you looking to make before the deadline?
Yeah, I'll get a start on this, Brij. And, I definitely think, look, the Yankees are in a tailspin right now. I don't care what anyone says. I think this is this is the worst that I've seen the Yankees play in a few years. And maybe tailspin was a little much, but I just
over.
Yeah, look, it's the Yankees. When they're losing, I'll take it when I can get it. I'm not used to this, so this is like gold for me. But Brij, like you kind of said, they lost 8 of their last 11. They've only scored 4 more runs in 3 of their last 11 games. I mean, this putrid offensively. They're only 4 games above 500 now, which is, that's good. But, in a division where you got the Rays who are, red hot, 36-23 in the year, you're up against Boston right now, 34. Like, if you get swept by Boston in this series, if you lose the series to Boston, it's going to be hard to make up these games in the AL East, because unlike the NL East, where you can kind of meander maybe because the divisions are not great, if you fall behind early here, it could get ugly in the second half.
I think that, this Yankees team, like, this week was going to be so important. They had the Rays series, they split it, which the way they're playing, I think you kind of got to take that. And we'll see what they do against, the Red Sox here. They already lost game 1. Like, I just feel like if you're coming in and, if you get swept, you lose 2 out of 3. I just think right now it's, this Yankees team, especially these division games, it's just, you got to start winning them. And like, this stretch hit them at the worst time, because even like they started off poorly, but then they got themselves going. It seemed like everything was going to be fine. And then bang, they got swept by the Tigers. And it's like, okay, like, now where are we going from here? I think they also lost 2 out of 3 against the Blue Jays as well. And like, again, Brij, I agree with you with saying just like this pitching staff, I don't think can carry them. Maybe like, I think the Mets pitching staff can carry them, especially through this rough stretch they're having, with all the injuries. I just think the Yankees can't do that. And I as much as the bottom of the order, it's definitely rough. The top of the order scares me the most, because your big boppers are there. And in that Rays series, the 1 through 5 hitters, so, the LeMayhews, the Judges, the Torreses, the Stantons, they were hitting 156. And last night or Friday night, they struck out, I think, 15 times against the Red Sox. Like, that's where, you really just starting to be like, what's happening to, these really solid, really all-stars, and they're just not playing well. It's really head scratching, and eventually they're going to have to get it going. And as Mike, you were saying, like, the division, they're going to have to get it going sooner or later, because the Red Sox keep winning games, the Rays keep winning games, and, you don't want to find yourself like at the All-Star break, like 8 games out, and then, you're really screwed there.
Yeah, no, I think you guys both hit the nail on the head. And I think, to Andrew's point, this past week has, I think, been the biggest test for the Yanks. You look at, we're about 2 months into the season, maybe about a third through the season. So at this point, your team should be coming together. You should be getting a sense of, okay, this is what we are. These are our problems. This is what we have to fix. You face off against two of your division rivals. As you said, you split the series against the Rays. You take that going into the Red Sox. You drop game one. You see what happens in game two. If you get swept in the Red Sox series, that's obviously a bad sign. You creep further back towards 500, and especially in the AL East with the Red Sox and the Rays, they kind of run that division, at least at this point. I think, it's trouble for the Yanks at this point. There's still a lot of baseball left. It's the beauty of playing 162 games, right? But they have to get it together. I really think that there are a lot of problems, offensively. Yes, they still have their hard hitters. You look at a LeMahieu, like you said, a Judge, a Stanton. But again, that's inconsistent. And if those guys don't have great games, the rest of the team never plays well. So that just turns out to 1 run, 2 run a game. And this team was built to hit home runs. This team was built to score, and you cannot win by just putting up a run or two a game.
I mean, Brij, you just mentioned it. I mean, you mentioned DJ LeMahieu. He's only batting 255. I mean, that's not what you're paying DJ LeMahieu for. You're paying this guy to hit over 300, to be that guy who hits some runners in scoring position. I mean, the Yankees as a team are one of the worst, have one of the worst averages in the league with runners in scoring position. I mean, it's just putrid. They're 231 with runners in scoring position. I mean, that's awful. And obviously with the Mets, I should know about not being able to hit runners in scoring position. But I mean, if the Yankees are going to go anywhere, guys like DJ LeMahieu, they got to wake up. You can't be batting 255 if they're going to pay you this money. Also, Clint Frazier, I mean, a double play machine. All this guy does is hit the double plays. He's only batting a $184. And, going into the season, he was supposed to be you're like, okay, finally we can move on from Brett Gardner. He could be our everyday left fielder. Well, unfortunately, because of the injury to Hicks, Brett Gardner is playing every day again. It seems like every year the Yankees come in, it's like, oh, Brett Gardner's just going to be that guy on the bench. And then it becomes like an everyday starter almost instantly. He's going to be out there until he's 70. But the Yankees, and we've said it, we've already killed the point here, but I can't overemphasize it. They cannot lose these division games. They've already lost 8 out of 13 to the Blue Jays. They've already lost 6 of 9 from the Sox. Baltimore, when the Yankees were kind of piling up wins this past few years, Baltimore was the punching bag. Well, the Yankees have kind of struggled a little bit last year and this year to kind of win those games against Baltimore, who's a little bit improved this year. It's just, I coming into the season, and we did a prediction show. I don't remember. I think Andrew actually might have been on the show. We predict who we had winning the World Series, getting there.
Yeah.
And my team out of the AL was the Yankees. And honestly, right now, I don't see it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I picked the White Sox instead. I guess I
picked the Padres, which I'm also very happy about as well. But.
Yeah, I think it's like this. I think this Yankees team, that they have to make the trades, and I think Brij, you were talking about earlier, and I think everyone thought it was going to be the rotation, and they'd have to add there, and it's just kind of they're going to have to add probably an outfielder. Probably, maybe a second baseman to get, Rougned Odor not playing every day. They're going to have to add something, maybe 2 bats to this lineup, especially at the bottom of the line. Maybe they're just role players that can get big hits, because that's what I think the Yankees need right now. It's, they're, as always, they've been home run dependent. I feel like even, in this stretch, they haven't scored a lot of runs, but when they do, it's by the home run ball. So you just need some, I think, professional hitters there. Maybe they're not the 300 amazing hitters, but guys that maybe at 250, hit the ball well, runners in scoring position, spray the ball the other way. I mean, just even I think it was a few days ago, but I think the first sacrifice bunt the Yankees had, they just had their first one since 2019. That's just way too much time. You got to do some small ball here. And especially when you're not hitting well, that's the stuff that gets you out of it, hitting the ball the opposite way. Maybe you just have to add professional hitters like that to, get out of that funk. And we'll see what, Brian Cashman does to, try to add to this team. And again, I just think this Yankees pitching staff, the bullpen's been outstanding. Give Aroldis Chapman all the credit. He's been basically shut down, unhittable. But the way this rotation, I don't think they're holding the Yankees, up going into September. I just don't think that this Yankees rotation does it. And we'll kind of see if the hitting, kind of takes this next step. They're going to need to. I think they actually end up will, and I think the Yankees will be fine. But as now we're entering June, the hitting still isn't there. It's now maybe a little time to worry.
Yeah, I agree. Look, usually they, most teams figure it out by August, September, but they badly need to bring someone in. I'd say a lefty bat, preferably an outfielder. Yeah. They could really use somebody like that. Like you said, Brett Gardner playing 140, 150 games a year. every year, like you said, you think, he's not going to play, and now he is. So it's always the next man up mentality. But if you don't have another man up, then, it makes your life pretty difficult. But I think you talk about the Yankees pitching, which has been great this season. And I think pitching all over the league has been great, which kind of moves us into our next headline, which is, the idea of doctored balls and foreign substances and the whole investigation, and to how maybe it contributes to the success of pitching this year. So earlier this week, evidence was presented at an owners meeting saying that ball doctoring was, and I quote, very prevalent in Major League Baseball. And if this is proven to be true, then it would make sense why this is the lowest batting average ever league-wide and the highest strikeout rate ever league-wide. So, put 2 and 2 together, that actually might make sense. And another thing that happened on June 2nd, 3 minor league pitchers were suspended for 10 games after being caught with illegal substances. So I guess, gents, what are your thoughts on this? And do you think the problem is as widespread as the league thinks?
Yeah, I think that I read the Sports Illustrated article that came out on it, and I just thought that, I feel like it's always been, I feel like a rumbling over the last few years, especially with guys like Trevor Bauer and Garrett Cole. I think those are the 2 guys that everyone's like, oh, they're definitely using it because everyone's looking at their spin rates. And I think Trevor Bauer, he was like, I couldn't even get he's like a pitching lab or whatever. I mean, that's the biggest Trevor Bauer thing ever. But, he has this, and he said he couldn't get the spin rate only if you use a foreign substance. And I remember in the offseason, when the Mets were going after him, he said that he was going to there was this rumor that he was going to come out publicly with it. This is he was going to make it so blatant that he would have to be called on it. So Rob Manfred looks bad because him and Rob Manfred go back and forth. And I think now it's probably really widespread. And I think a lot of guys, their spin rates are going astronomically up just over the last year or 2. And unless everyone has the same, pitching coach that's telling them this is what you do to get your spin rate up, I think the only possible thing would be to, probably doctor the balls, whatever that you stick them or whatever. Yu Darvish, I was looking at it, his spin rate, throughout his career, it was just stagnant. It was a straight line. And then over the last 2 years, it just rocketed up. That is, a little sketchy. And then if this is true, I think that the teams aren't going to call each other on it. I think that's the thing. Teams haven't called each other on it. I don't think they probably ever will, but the umpires have to. And, MLB is going to have to tell these umpires you just have to watch out for this type of stuff and, basically throw guys out of games, whatever it may be. And I don't know, it seems like a very, sticky situation, no pun intended, for the MLB.
Yeah. To your point, Andrew, I think that, the managers aren't going to call it out because all their own guys are doing it. I think, did Bauer say, I don't remember what the percent was. It was a couple years ago. He said it was 75 or 85% of the pitchers in the league are using a foreign substance, which how he would know that number. Trevor Bauer is crazy. So maybe I don't know, but also Josh Donaldson claims to have videotapes of all the guys using it, which who knows if that's true, but I do think it's very prevalent in the league, but I just think the managers don't want to call out other pitchers because, they don't want their own guys to get called. You mentioned Yu Darvish the other night, clear as day. I'm on Twitter. They're posting the video of the zoomed in. You can see literally he's swiping a little something out of the glove, rubbing the ball. It's so obvious that he's doing it. And then after the game, they asked Rojas, hey, did you see it? What do you think? And even if he didn't see it on the field, there is no way that someone up high said, hey, Luis, he's using the substance. And the only reason I could think that he didn't say anything was because, a guy like Seth Lugo, they always talk about his spin rate. How does he have a spin rate that crazy high? I love the guy. I don't want to insinuate anything, but Taijuan Walker's having suddenly an amazing year, amazing, half from last year. Is he doing it? I don't know. I don't think so. But the only thing I can think of is that the guy like Familia, who struggled with control forever, is he using something? The only reason I can think that Rojas is not, and other managers are not saying anything, is because they don't want their own guys getting caught. And Garrett Cole, we mentioned Garrett Cole, his spin rate always talked up. Thursday, the announcement came out on Thursday. That evening, Cole had the worst start of his season, and it wasn't even close. And also, I heard on they mentioned on WFAN during one of the shows that his spin rate was the lowest it had been in his career. And don't you find that a little, fishy? His spin rate's up, and they're like, hey, stop using substances, and all of a sudden it's really down. That's really weird to me.
Yeah, and I agree with both of you guys. I think Mike brings up a great point because it's a double-edged sword, especially if you're a manager, because your own guys are using it. They're throwing no hitters. I mean, you look at this year, you've had 5 or 6 this season. So your pitchers are playing extremely well, but your hitters aren't. So what are you going to stop? Are you going to call out your pitchers and then your pitchers aren't as good? It's like you kind of just let it go at a certain point. It's a really difficult situation. And I think I'm curious how this league investigation will go, if they are going to actually call people out, if they're going to, like you talked about, it looked like when Darvish was pitching, was it Friday night, Thursday night against the Mets? It looked like there was something in his glove. You never know. So I'm curious to see what happens, because this season has been very unorthodox when it comes to pitching and the success that pitchers have been having. I mean, I think, the ERAs are as low as they've ever been. And I just want to see if this is the reason why.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Andrew.
Okay. Yeah. I just think that, I think this has been obviously the lowest lowest batting average ever. And I think it's probably a combination of these sticky substances. Also, I don't know, what's the difference that it makes? How marginal is it? And, is it the way hitters are, trying to approach the game? Is it the abundance of information and statistics that pitchers now have? And that's kind of developed faster than, the hitting side of the game. Or is it just because we're playing, in the spring and now we're hitting the summer, where the ball obviously is going to fly out faster in the summer, and, just the heat and all that stuff. I think it's probably a combination of all of that. But again, this is something that I think the MLB can stop the easiest, probably. I don't know. In that Sports Illustrated article, they talked about having basically a TSA system. It's like when you go into the bullpen that you're checking for these substances, which I don't know how, you can replicate that so quickly. And there's probably stuff you can get around that as well. But I don't know. It seems like, to have this 80% of the league using, basically breaking a rule, just like steroids. I mean, it's definitely something that, the MLB has to look into now. And it will make Manfred look really bad if it came out that, this was true, and that, 90% of the league was using, stick 'em basically.
I mean, look, it's hard for Manfred to look any worse than he does. I mean, He's a clown. Bud Selig was a clown for steroids. I mean, the commissioners of baseball do not have a great track record between being racist and all the different things. But, but going back to, let's just get focused on the topic at hand, though, with the substances. I mean, it's funny because, you always heard for a little bit that a lot of hitters actually didn't mind that pitchers used a little bit of, pine tar or whatever. To also, they talk about, one of the things is sunscreen with, rosin that helps, but they didn't mind it because it helped them control a fastball. So it wouldn't have a Kevin Pillar situation run up on someone's head and hit him in the face or whatever. But where the issue comes is the pitchers aren't really using it to, maybe that's outwardly what they're saying to their teammates, or their opponents, but what they're really doing is they're using it for their breaking balls to throw things that spin and move crazy, like it's a wiffle ball essentially. And you mentioned, Andrew, this idea of the pitchers are going to come out to the mound, the umpire is going to go up there and pat them down like it's TSA and pull the Vaseline out of their hat. And they're going to have pine tar in their back pocket. What are we doing here? I mean, that's just you either come. And also the thing is, they said, oh, well, if the guy comes up to the mound and he has a substance, we'll just ask him to change his hat or glove and then he can stay in the game. Well, what are we doing? I get that he can't use it now, but is that really a hard line? Also going to slow down the game by checking? I'm sorry. It should be if you show up like Michael Pineda and you have pine tar all over your neck, you're out of the game and you're done. We're not giving you a chance to get a towel and wash it off. It's absurd to me. And, MLB it's just so poorly run. Why do you have to do it? It's just a joke. I can't. It's just the way that they police themselves for years has always been pathetic. And this latest announcement about how they're going to deal with the foreign substances is just another example of why they are who they are.
Well, Mike, I can tell you're pretty passionate about this. I mean, we could talk about this all day, but I do want to move to our final segment of headlines here. The All-Star ballots just went live as of a couple days ago. So let's talk about the hometown ball clubs. I guess if you guys are filling out a ballot, who would you put on there from the Yankees and Mets? Just give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go crazy. I'm sure there's a lot of people that be like, oh, wow, Jose Peraza should be, because he really filled in great there. I know, Andrew, you're not a fan of his, or oh, Billy McKinney's been great so far. Let's vote him in. No, I'm doing realistic picks here, people. Okay. This is maybe you can name another guy or two, probably not. The two guys on the Mets that I would throw out there, obviously DeGrom. I mean, of course, best pitcher in baseball, lowest ERA, lowest WHIP in the league. I mean, the guy's just an animal. Whether he actually pitches in the All-Star game because of injury or whatever, or he wants to protect himself, who knows? But of course, DeGrom, and also Taijuan Walker, who's had a really sneakily, I think, great season. Has a 2.17 ERA, one of the top in the league. He's been really good. I really like the way that he pitched. Is he going to get in? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe an injury replacement or something. But I think he's been one of the better pitchers. I think he deserves a vote. And then maybe even, the bullpen's been really good. A guy like Miguel Castro, who's got some wicked stuff. I mean, that could play an All-Star game to see a guy like that pitch. So that's it for the Mets. And then for the Yankees, I know we kind of just talked about him with foreign substances, but until he gets caught, Garrett Cole, 2.26 ERA, third in the league at strikeouts. He's, DeGrom's better, but he's also great. And, I know the offenses have been, still for the Yankees, but Aaron Judge, he's tied for 7th in the league with home runs, 14, top 10. And, he's the star of the game. I don't like the Yankees, but, you always got to have one of those Yankee stars there. So for me, if I'm picking the local guys, it's DeGrom, Taijuan Walker, Garrett Cole, Aaron Judge.
Yeah, so for me, I think DeGrom's definitely starting for the NL. I think we could all say that. And I mean, like you said, like if he wants to do it for injury, I mean, for him, what's 10 pitches? Because that's all he's going to take to get through that first inning.
That's going to scare me. 10 pitches, that's one pitch to Tommy John. I don't want to see that.
His delivery, so he's the best. I mean, he's having literally like the best season of all time, which is like just crazy up to this point, which I mean, like his stuff, I think is just, it's just baffling how good it is. And I mean, I bet right now, as we're on air, I bet he's dealing against the Padres, this Saturday night. And, I feel like, he's going to make it. Taijuan Walker, I think probably him or Stroman will make it. I think Stroman's, a little more popular with just, in the, has done it before, I think is the big thing with him. I would like to see him in there. And then also, I think Edwin Diaz, I mean, I don't think he'll make it. I think his ERA is too high, but his stuff's just been a lot better. And I'm a fan of Edwin Diaz, so I'll vote for him. I don't think he'll get in.
I go so back and forth on Diaz. Like he'll pitch well. I'm like, yeah, he's back. But then like he goes out there and like, well, I don't care how well he pitches. Also, like the whole thing, it's like he's great in safe situations, but then he has a 5 ERA in non-safe situations. Like, are we really doing that? Like, whatever. But go ahead, Andrew. I cut you off there.
So yeah, I mean, like I don't see a Mets hitter getting in. Maybe if Pete Alonso keeps it up, because we're still pretty far away. But I don't think even he'll make it. I don't think he's been, because he hasn't played enough games. And for the Yankees, I agree. I think Cole, Judge, and then also Chapman, who I think will definitely be a reliever out of there. Yeah, he's, I think right now the best closer in the game. And I mean, he's just been, so good. And he's the reason that one of the reasons that the Yankees are 4 games over 500 to start and still are in, I think, a good position going forward. It's not like they're dead in the water. And those are kind of, I guess, the 3 for the Yankees, 3 for the Mets, here going into the All-Star game.
Yeah, I mean, I basically had those guys, a combination of those guys for my picks as well. I mean, to start with the Yanks, I had Judge and Cole, and I think bringing up Chapman, I didn't even think of that as the relief/closer. That's definitely a good pick. I mean, Cole's the ace, 2.26. He's having a great season. And for all the woes in the Yankees lineup, Judge has been hitting reasonably well. He's just under 300. He's tied for 7th, as Mike said, 14 homers, OPS of 938. So he's having a goodish season so far. And then for the Mets, of course, I think, Jacob deGrom, he's, 0.71 ERA, arguably one of the best seasons ever so far. So can't really leave him off your ballot. So I guess that's really it to wrap up here for the headline segment. You were listening to One on One.
sure to check out all of our latest podcasts on WFUVSports.org or wherever you get your shows, including NFL Friday, Nosebleeds, Pick and Pod, 5 on 3, College Gridiron, and FUV FC. Also, our newest edition, Off the Air, diving into the station's legacy with its most prominent alumni. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics. It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. I am Mike Legan, joined alongside by Andrew Latta. You're listening to us on 90.7 FM, YouTube, Facebook Live, wherever you're seeing us, you're hearing us. And right now, we're going to continue with the baseball talk. And of course, we got to talk the Mets. And I know, this show would not be complete for me if we not have a full-length Mets segment. There's just so much to break down with this team. So many frustrating things, so many great things. I don't know where to start. Maybe the first thing to start with is the fact that despite all the injuries, despite the fact that there are guys on this team that were not here 2 weeks ago, despite the fact that you had to rely on guys like John Sweet Fargus and Cameron Maybin, and then they end up going away, and then you got to rely on guys like Brendan McKinney, who I really enjoy, and then Brandon Drury, who should be gone soon. They're still in first place, and they have a 4-game lead in the East. It's the largest division lead in baseball, which again, it's only early June, but it'll help when the Mets have their June swoon, as Tank would say, and, lose all these games. But Andrew, your thoughts on this early success despite the injuries?
Yeah, I think this seems so fun to watch. They're just and the Mets have had a ton of injuries in the past, and these guys like the Brandon McKinneys, the Mason Williams, the Khalil Lees, or whoever, you want to bring up, because I feel like or basically the half of our team's the Syracuse Mets right now, especially this lineup, but they kind of come up in big situations. Like they may only have a 200 average or a 170 average, but like if the Mets need a hit, these guys are coming through, or they need a fly ball or whatever. And even Brandon McKinney, I know the Mets lost the game, but he had the triple to bring in the run. And, I feel like these guys, they're not, as bad as maybe their numbers say. Even a guy like Jonathan VR, who was, obviously is injured right now. And we'll see kind of how that plays out with, his injury, and hopefully come back soon. But his stat line isn't the best, but you just feel his impact. If it's not with the bat, it's with defense. They do the little things right, which I love so much. The Mets never do the little things right. So to see this team do the little things right is great. They play good defense. Lindor is finally over 200 too, which is,
it's kind of sad when you really analyze that statement though. You're like, oh, he's over 200, but that's not really something we should be celebrating. But yeah, go ahead. No,
but you kind of have to, I think right now, I think he'll get hot, but that's just my opinion. James McCann's coming through. I almost said Brian McCann, but James McCann's coming through, I think, as well. He's starting to catch hot. And again, I think this rotation will continue to carry this Mets team until, the rest of their hitters come back. Hopefully they can do that. I think this rotation's solid, I'd say, especially when, you have DeGrom, who's going to basically give you a very good chance to win every fifth day. The bullpen, I think, has been just so solid. And that's probably the reason why they've been, successful here. And I think they've been winning division games, which, you could talk about the NL East not being, up to snuff and not being the best division, but the Mets have won when they went on their hot streaks. It's usually against the Braves, Marlins, whoever it may be, Phillies. And I think that's important. I know the Padres, who lost the first 2 games here, but Padres are a great team. And, as long as you're fighting with them and hopefully end up, winning a few games at the end of the series, I kind of like where this Mets team is. And they just got to stay above water until, everything comes and the reinforcement comes along with, the rest of their lineup and the pitching as well.
Well, first things first, I realized I called Billy McKinney Brendan McKinney, and I like to apologize to our amazing right fielder. But like you said, baseball is a game of streaks. The way it works is you play 500 ball most of the year, and then every once in a while go on a run, win 5, 10, 15 games in a row, some crazy number. Which is what the Mets have been doing and which they should continue to do. And like you said, with the division's weak, but that's to their advantage. I mean, the Mets have one of the weakest strength of schedules leading up to the All-Star break.
Yeah.
And I think after the All-Star break as well. I could be wrong. I have to check on that. But, look, you could say that like, oh, the Mets aren't that good because it's such a weak schedule. Well, look, at the end of the day, I don't care. I want the team to make the playoffs. And when the playoffs happen, anything happens, So I think it's key for the Mets to continue to beat the Braves. The fact that they beat the Braves and the Marlins with this, makeshift team, whatever, is impressive. And it's what they need to do. But it's not sustainable. And, you mentioned the big hit. And in the Arizona series, they were getting that. For the past few series, they were getting the Atlanta series. They got that. I mean, 13 runs, 14.
Yeah, 13-2.
Against Atlanta a week ago. But, but in the San Diego series, it has not been the big hit so far, which has been very frustrating. And what that really gets to is like, this team is a lot of fun and it's very likable and it's cool to see these guys. It's almost like Moneyball in a way, like these guys that come out of nowhere. But, it just shows that you need the regulars back. I mean, I'm sorry. I cannot watch Brandon Drury. Like, this isn't 2015. Like, he's fine. He's a solid player, I guess, but he had a couple nice home runs. But the last 2 nights have been brutal watching him up there in big spots, striking out. He made an error the other night. I mean, Jonathan VR, he's hurt, so he had to play more. But like, with that guy, what was it? The forward bat with Tank. What's the guy's name? The guy that's been on waivers 100 times. I'm blanking on his name right now.
Mason Williams or
no. The guy, Trackenhorn.
Yeah, Trackenhorn, something like
whatever
that.
his name is. I know the name. I apologize to him. I just can't think of it off the top of my head. But Blankenhorn, is that whatever? I don't know what his name is. I think it's the bottom line is the fact that I don't know his name.
Travis Blankenhorn. That's what it is.
Whatever. The fact that I don't know his name should tell you everything you need to know about him as a player. He's not memorable at all. And he shouldn't be on this team. I feel bad for him that he's been on 4 teams in 4 weeks, but like, he's better than Wilfredo Tovar. If I had to look at Wilfredo Tovar, if I had to see his face, number 72, which is another joke, these players all wearing like 70, 72, like it's spring training. If I had to look at him again, I'd lose it. So thank God he's gone. But this is just not like, it helps that they're playing bad, like teams that aren't that great, but like this, they need the regulars back at some point. And it just, I enjoy this team. I like this team, but as the Padres series is proving, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that this team is like, like you can't go into the playoffs with Brendan Drury as your 6th hitter, or like when Cameron Maybin was batting 3rd for this team. Like, yeah, obviously that can't happen. And I think the Mets, I think they're waiting see how these injuries play out and how long they're gonna have to do it for, because like obviously Syndergaard, he had the setback, but like if Conforto had a setback, and I know they're not even due back to late June, July anyways, but if they had a setback or someone else had a setback, then you have to look at outside the organization, who can you bring in that can actually give you professional at bats? Because as much as like I don't expect a lot from the Mason Williams, the Brendan McKinney, like whoever it is, the Billy McKinneys of the world, at a certain point you need these hits from the 6, 7, 8 guys, at least something. And especially when Lindor and McCann aren't, they're only, I'm happy that they're starting to get hot and they're not hitting on the interstate anymore, but you got to hit better than 200. And especially like I think last night or Friday night was the perfect sum up. You get Lindor on 3rd because of the errors, the base hit and the errors, and then you have McCann and Alonso up to just driving a runner from 3rd, and they can't do it. And look, Blake Snell's a great pitcher, and and no outs, exactly. And those guys have to come through, and if they're not, against the big pitchers, the Snells, the Darvishes, or whoever the Padres are throwing, because they're obviously a great team, that's where this team's going to find their issues. Because as good as this rotation is, you can't ask them every day to throw shutouts and 7 innings, 1 run. But I think by the time they have to make runs in August, September, even I think end of July, you're hoping that Conforto's back, you're hoping that JD Davis, like whoever is back. I think this team needs their Nimmo as well. Like, and they need those professional hitters, those professional at bats that they're just not getting right now from the bottom of the lineup. And again, I think that'll happen. And if these guys, let's say one of the two of the guys don't come back, you have to look at the trade market and see who you can, bring in here. And I definitely think they will. It's just kind of the matter of time, that happens and kind of how these injuries play out.
Yeah, I mean, well, like you said with Conforto and McNeil, I mean, they're saying like end of June, early July till they come back. I mean, and JD Davis and Brandon Nimmo, I mean, they're like in the witness protection program. Like we may never hear from them again. I don't know what happened to them. And also, like, they have hand injuries. Like, you're kidding me. You got a hand injury and Brandon Nimmo's like his finger hurts. I get it, like, is a nerve issue, but like Ronnie Lott, NFL Hall of Fame safety, literally cut off his finger at a halftime and went back out there. Like, that's how much he wants. I guess hands are more important in baseball, but like it's just
I don't think
like
you can cut off a finger and still hold it back.
Probably not. Well, I mean, there was that guy in the Yankees who like pitched a no hitter who had not no hitter with like one hand or
pitching. I think is more possible.
Well, anyway, the bottom line is it's so frustrating with baseball with some of these injuries. Like, look, I'm not experienced these injuries. I don't want to minimize their pain, but like it's just so like, and I get they're different sports, but when you watch guys like in the NFL or other like hockey and they get like seriously injured and then they're just like they're back out there. It's like the baseball players like, oh, my quad is tight. I'm out for 2 weeks. Like, it's just so frustrating.
But then you bring up a guy like Kevin Pillar who had the face
Kevin,
mask.
Kevin Pillar.
Look, I
really like Kevin Pillar. The face mask is nice. That being said, he did like strike out in key situations on Friday night. So my love for him did go down a little bit. I appreciate him coming back though. I mean, the guy's he's a cool guy.
Out there.
clearly that our big prospect trade, who is barely, I mean, I don't know how he's a prospect. You can't hit the broadside of a barn. Anyway, the bottom line is this. I'm worried about how this team can sustain. I guess we just have to hope they can continue to feast in a weak division. But with all these guys, I mean, the closest people back are Guillorme, who's starting a rehab assignment. It'd be nice to have him back. But then again, like Guillorme is not like, yeah, he had a good year last year. He was hitting relatively well. Also, his defense was kind of bad, which was a little disappointing of him because he's so good defensively before he got hurt. It'd be nice to have him back. Albert Amora is rehabbing, and to be honest, I don't want to see him again because talk about a guy that can't hit. We all got like Cameron Maben for like having no hits. I think he was like 1 for 20 or something to start off the season.
He was an 0 for 18 slump
before
his injury.
Yeah,
he's still active. Yeah.
And I get Mason Williams only has like 2 hits so far, and Billy McKinney is only batting like 210. But I'm sorry, like at least when they get up there, I'm like, oh, maybe they can get a hit. Like Albert Amora gets up there, I'm like, oh, let's just innings over. Like it's 2 outs. Okay, he's up, innings over. I guess I could just go to commercial now. Like Billy McKinney, like I really love the way he plays right field. Like he's been really great. Now Mason Williams also pulled a Canseco and bounced the ball off himself into the over the fence for a home run. But Albert Amora, I mean, I'd rather than just keep Mason Williams and Billy McKinney up there. But I don't know. It's weird because like even though the team isn't like for example, like a guy like Billy McKinney, even though he's batting 210, like I don't know, it's to see the guys that are no name succeed, you get really attached to them. So when the regulars come back and they get like DFA at a release, to kind of like you feel bad for them. You're like, oh, I wish I could stay with the team some more. But also you bring up the idea of a trade. Like my biggest concern with that is the Mets for so long getting rid of prospects, and it's just like
I know about it.
I know Jared Kelenic has been terrible, which has been nice, but like I would like Chris Bryant on this team, sure, but also I don't want to give up Brett Beatty to get him. You know what I'm saying?
I agree. I don't know if they're going to bring in like a star. I don't think this team really needs they really need Lindor to be their star, and he needs to hit better. And like they give him the money to, hopefully he eventually, starts really carrying the team, and he's going to eventually, I think, have to, especially if the injuries stay, but just guys that like just give you professional at bats. And like, I don't know if this team needs like in 2015, like they brought in Cespedes. Like, I don't know if they need that type of hitter, but even guys like even 2015, like how much did Juan Uribe help and Kelly Johnson just to give you those at bats? And I mean, like, I think this team is kind of similar to that 2015 team just a bit. I mean, you talk about like these no-namers, Eric Campbell, like remember him? Soup that in that lineup, John Mayberry Jr. in that lineup.
Oh my God, John Mayberry Jr. I think his batting average was like 0.00005 or something. The guy was not a major leaguer. But go ahead.
Yeah, and then like they ended up turning it around, getting guys back, bringing up Conforto, like stuff like that. And I think this team, especially the way they're pitching, I think the bullpen's better now, and I think the defense is also better now, which I think is very, very important. And like, but even, with this pitching staff, you get some quality outings out of like Lucchesi on Friday night. Like you didn't really expect to be in that game. I mean, at the end of the day, you have Lucchesi against Snell with, your 6, 7, 8 in your lineup, and you could add the pitcher in there too. We're basically automatic outs are very close to that. And you're in that game until the end. That's, I think really, impressive. And that's big for Lucchesi. If he's pitching well, that gives you, I think, an extra dimension. The last 2 outings, he has pitched well. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what this rotation can do. Carrasco's another guy. If he comes back, I think that would be big. And then David Peterson right now struggling. Maybe you were talking about the guys going, hitting, they're like 70, 71. Maybe he needs to go back to 72, his old number from last year.
He should. I mean, literally, David Peterson, I put it up on my Twitter. I made a little meme. I'm big into making some Mets memes on my Twitter page. Check it out. I think my handle should be on this screen somewhere. But I made a meme. It was like Freddy from Scooby-Doo unmasking someone. And it was like David Peterson unmasked. It's just Steven Matz. And that's really what he is.
Yeah.
Like
a bigger version.
A lefty who like can't make it out of the first inning. Literally, all right, David Peterson has a 5.89 ERA, which is not good. It should be like 20, but somehow it's not. He's had a couple of good starts, I guess. Was only pitched by 7 innings once, which by the way was against the Rays. And when he made it to the 7th or made it to the 8th, he imploded. So that was great. He's only pitched 6 innings 3 times. He always seems to struggle in the first inning, even when he like pitches longer. The first inning is always like it seems to me, and I wouldn't really say it's the yips because it's not like Rick Ankiel where he's throwing it into like the 5th row, but like. It just seems like that he gets in his own head sometimes. It's like I feel bad for him, but like, it's just like you have compassion for the guy. You want to see him do well, but also like, I want my team to win. And the simple fact is like, you already like, let's be honest. I trust DeGrom, obviously. Taijuan Walker has pretty much earned my trust, and I trust Stroman. That leaves you 4 and 5. And with Syndergaard maybe not even pitching this year, if he does, it's August. Carrasco, another guy that's just gone missing. Jed Lowry must tell these guys where to hide. I don't know. Is there like a secret hiding spot in the Mets organization? I don't know. Carlos Carrasco, he's gone somewhere. So, it's Peterson with Lucchesi, they're stretching him out a bit, but like when he pitches, you're getting 4 or 5 and it's a bullpen day. So you cannot afford to have, and the Mets already saw it with the Diamondbacks and Padres series where their bullpen was spent and they couldn't do what they really wanted to. And like, you cannot have Peterson going out there and pitching like 1, 2, 3 innings. Like that's it, when you already have Lucchesi, you can't go that long. That is just going to kill your team down the stretch. You cannot. I mean, the fact that they got him a 4-0 lead in against Arizona and he blew it. I mean, that's just infuriating.
Home runs and walks. I mean, that's Steven Matz. You're talking about Steven Matz.
Steven Matz.
The stuff is not, he's basically a stock lefty. You're hoping that, he can give you, he still was like 93 to 95, which is good. But I think, the home runs, the walks are obviously the issue. And we'll see if he can fix it, if he can't fix it. And I do think the makeup's the same too. He kind of implodes after, an error or something just like Matt's. I mean, at least he's not, yeah. I mean, at least he's not, cursing into his mitt like Matt was every time, but, or, taking a bat and, killing the water cooler. But, I think that he's kind of that same, hasn't really, I think he just needs to, I guess, mature a bit. Maybe it's that. I don't know, but he's going to have to kind of fix that. Home runs is like the big issue because the home runs and walks, you put that together. That's why he has the 580 ERA. And you think it could be higher because there are some starts where he's great because he's not getting up the home run ball. He's not walking guys. When that's not happening, he's pretty solid. But when he's consistently giving up, you walk a guy and give up a home run, that's 2 runs. You do it again. And, it's kind of just a vicious cycle. And saw it with Matz just last year and the year before. And this year with Peterson, I mean, it's something that you kind of hope, and also you kind of need a lefty in there too. I think that's important. I mean, they have 2 right now, but if Carrasco and Syndergaard come back, that means you have 0. So to have either him or Lucchesi in there, I think Lucchesi's coming into his own a bit these last 2 starts, which is great to see. I like this herky jerky motion he has, still throwing 93 to 95. I think that the way he's deceptive could be, really good. Peterson, I think they're going to need one of those guys, I think, to step up, at least in the short term until Carrasco comes back. Because in the playoffs, you don't need 5 starters. You can go with the 4, and you're hoping Carrasco's solid. And even if Syndergaard doesn't come back, you still have a solid 4. But again, I think to win games, again, as you said, those D-backs games, those should be easy wins after you get 4 runs in the first. And you're grinding out wins, you're pitching your Diaz's, your Castros, it's going to hurt. Obviously, having Lugo back is huge, really, really big. But I think you gotta, this team never wins, blows out teams. They had the 13-2 blowout, but it's always 1-2 run games. And that at a certain point gets your bullpen, definitely it puts stress onto it. And they've responded so far, but I think at a certain point, it's like kind of, you're going to have to start hitting, maybe pitching a little better, or like when you're hitting well, you kind of got to shut the door. So I think that's definitely important.
Yeah, I mean, the bullpen, like you said, has been a surprise, but I'm worried, like, if they continue to get overtaxed like this, how much longer, is this going to just blow up in our faces? I
think Lugo back is huge because he can pitch multiple innings, hopefully save guys. I know he hasn't really pitched so much. I don't know why that's the case, but
yeah,
maybe they're just trying to ease him back into it. That's really the only thing I can think of. But if he's going 2 innings every other day or once every 2 days, once every 3 days, that's huge, I think, for this pen, because if your starter goes 6, let's say Stroman goes 6 or Stroman goes 7, you bring in Lugo, and then you don't have to use anybody else really. That's huge, to save guys like Castro and May. And I think that's a big weapon. I mean, hopefully, they can start using them like that again. And I think that'll do dividends, I think, for this team to, hopefully give guys like Castro or Loop, who I think pitch basically every night, some rest.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's my biggest problem. My biggest problem with Rojas, and I want to talk about this also with your opinion of Rojas. But first off, going back a little bit what you said about Lucchesi and Peterson being the lefties in the lineup, it seemed to me that the plan was, Loop is the only lefty in the bullpen. You also mentioned that. And it seemed that the whole plan was, well, Carrasco should be back soon, start after the start of the season, so we can get away with only having one lefty, and then we can move Lucchesi into the bullpen, and then eventually move Peterson in the bullpen, and you have 3 lefties in there. By the way, Peterson, Lucchesi, if those guys come back, Lucchesi actually had a good start against the Padres, but those are the 2 guys you send into the bullpen when you got to make. I don't believe in 6-man rotations, so those are the 2 guys. You also don't want to limit the DeGrom starts, but exactly. The point is, that's the reason. I don't care if it's all righty rotation. The simple fact is, I think they would help better in the bullpen, especially Peterson, because I feel like maybe he can just do better in a 1-inning role or something. But my biggest problem with Rojas, and we'll talk about Rojas in general overall, is I don't like the way that he manages this bullpen. It's very frustrating to me because I feel, I don't know, he's a big analyst guy. I think also, this is definitely a situation where the front office has heavy say in the moves that he makes. But first off, the use of Lugo has been puzzling, to say the least. I mean, my opinion is, look, if you're healthy and you're on this team, you pitch. I don't want to hear any of this garbage of, oh, we're going to ease him back in. Well, if he's not ready to pitch at high leverage, he shouldn't be with the team. Like, he's been here forever. He was on a playoff. I don't think he pitched in that wild card game, but he's been in.
He was on the team, though.
He was on the team, though. He's on the stretch. He's been in high leverage situations. He was a closer. Like, if he's healthy, he should pitch. And on Friday night, he warms up. I get that they're down 2, but great, you just wasted him this evening. Like, this whole thing, well, he was warming up for so long, so we can't put him in the game. Like, that was stupid. Like, he should just come in. Because Drew Smith, he's so great. Like, whatever. And my biggest problem with Rojas is that he just falls in love with guys in the bullpen. I get Loop is their only lefty, but Loop pitches. I swear the guy's arm's going to fall off. He's like the Winter Soldier and have a metal arm. Like, literally, he pitches every night. It's absurd. And Jacob Barnes is pitching all the time. And I get it. Look, the guys have been good. Trevor May was able to bounce back Friday night. But, it just seems like, and maybe maybe just because I watch every game, so I feel like I see them all the time. But I don't remember. I just feel like it's always May is always out there for too long, and I think Castro's been managed somewhat well, but Loop and May are out there all the time. Loop, May, and Jacob Barnes are used way too much, in my opinion.
Jacob Barnes definitely is. That's a very good point.
Jacob Barnes, I'll give him credit. He bounced back from that terrible first appearance, but the bullpen's been a pleasant surprise. I'm very happy with it, but I'm very worried about the way Rojas manages, because I feel like not only is the bullpen as a whole being used a lot because guys aren't going long enough, but specific guys, and we even see in May who've seemed worn down the past few weeks, are just getting are these guys going to have live arms by July, August? I'm getting worried.
That's why I think you need Lugo. I mean, and I think that's a good point. Why? And I honestly, I think that's coming from, higher up. And Rojas kind of reminds me. Yeah. So I don't know if you really blame it on Rojas. I guess you could, because he's the manager, and he's got to deal with this stuff. But he's a guy that, I don't know. He's the guys play for him, which I think is so important. How many teams, if they had all these injuries, be okay, it's not really our year. Where it's not working out. We have our whole lineup. I mean, at one point it was only Lindor in the lineup and nobody else from that opening day lineup. At some point you're and they didn't really go on a slide. It was maybe 1 or 2 games in a row, but then they'd win 4 or 5, and they'd be able to have good stretches. You've got to give Rojas credit for that. And the in-game stuff, I think, especially basically growing up in this Terry Collins era of the Mets, where in-game wasn't even his specialty either. You're kind of used to that type of stuff and ridiculing in-game, managers. And
Terry had a way with words, though. I mean,
he did.
Your blanks are in the jackpot. He had a way
Rojas got thrown out last night.
Was nice. That's a lost art, especially in this COVID era. Is I feel like managers, and I just feel like maybe just because they're so used to being told what to do that they're not as fiery. But like, I love when managers get thrown out. I love when Jeff Mangold used to get in people's faces.
Yeah.
Terry used to do it a lot, as per the jackpot incident.
Yeah.
It was nice. I think it was only the second time he's been rung out his entire tenure with the Mets. But like, he kind of got aggressive with them. But I want to see like some Joe Girardi, like finger pointing. Like let's get some dirt there on the ground. Like when you get thrown out, you got to get your money's worth. Just go all the way. Like just scream, yell.
Once you're thrown out,
throw a trash can onto the field like that minor league guy did that one time.
Threw the bases out of the hole.
Just go crazy. Like I think Clint Hurdle one time like went to first base, just like or took the base with, I don't know. That's what I want to see when a manager gets ejected.
No, I mean, like I agree. And I think Rojas does give this team energy. I think maybe it's because he's young, maybe because he knows them too, because he's been in the organization a while, which I like. The in-game stuff, I don't know if it bothers, just because like I kind of been used to this in-game type of stuff where the bullpen's mismanaged, and maybe that's just, like as you said, watching every game, you're just like, I mean, they play 162. There are going to be some good decisions. There's going to be some bad decisions, but it just seems like some of these guys, like I think Loop's one of those. Like, I mean, you remember with Collins with Scott Rice, where the guy pitched like 85 times as a lefty because he was the only lefty, and then he just had like one great year, and that was it. Like, you'd hope that's not the case with Loop.
Yeah, let's talk about some great Mets relievers of years.
Scott every minute Rice,
Vic Black, Bobby Parnell, Carlos Torres. Antonio Bastardo, who was, oh God, he was awful. Antonio Bastardo, Alex Torres with the stupid, I know he's hitting the head, but yeah, whatever. I don't know. It's just, there's just the Mets. It's nice to let's as we wrap up our Mets segment here, let's just finish up with this final thought, Andrew, and I think you would agree. It's nice that the Mets are winning, and the team is. This is not the Padres. This is not the Dodgers. By the way, speaking of the Padres, I hate the Padres now. Like, I loved watching them from afar. Like, it was, oh yeah, this team's so cool. They got swagger, whatever. And then when I see them show up my team, I wish like Doc and Daryl and like Gary Carlos on the team so they can go beat them up out on the mound. Like, it's I hate them now. But at the end of the day, hopefully we'll get some wins here, even up the series with the Padres. It's but it's nice for the Mets to win. That's as simple as a Met fan can say it. But we're going to keep the baseball talk continuing after the break, because Andrew and I are going to sit down with the former head strength and conditioning coach for the New York Yankees and New York Mets, Mr. Jeff Mangold. So stay tuned for that interview. You're listening to One on One.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, Visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
One-on-one, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. I am Michael Legan, joined alongside by Andrew Gulata, and right now we'd like to welcome in the former head strength and conditioning coach for both the New York Yankees and New York Mets. He is the author of Power and Pinstripes, My Years Training the New York Yankees, Mr. Jeff Mangold. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everybody.
So, Jeff, right off the top, one of the first things I would love to ask you is, well, first off, I'm a Met fan myself. I know Andrew's a big Met fan. And looking at your book and reading some of your book, one of the first things that you talk about is the Roger Clemens Piazza incident during the 2000 World Series, which is obviously infamous for Mets and Yankee fans. And of course, you say in your book how you actually were the one who got the broken bat and held on to it for 14 years and later sold it at auction. So I'm just kind of curious, if you could, for the audience, maybe talk about your point of view of that confrontation, and then maybe how you came into possession of the bat.
Yeah, it was very intense game, to say the least. When you play the Mets, Yankees and Mets, it's always very intense. But then you wrap that up that it's in the World Series, then it's multiplied. And then you multiply it again where it's Piazza and Clemens engaging each other. And I think when that barrel of the bat went flying out towards Roger, I really don't know what was going on in Roger's mind at the time, but you'd have to say it was a combination of him thinking it was a ground ball and then realizing, wait a minute, it's not a ground ball, but I'm so amped up and I'm so psyched up that, like, get this thing out of here. And he flung it towards the foul territory, and it, of course, is zoomed right by Piazza, and it's just a strange incident. And to me, being there, witnessing this, just maybe 25, 30 feet away there in the dugout, the process was the bat boy would run out there and get any shard bats as customary throughout the year. And that bat was brought in and sat down in the corner of the dugout right near where I was. And I said, I'm not going to let this be thrown away like the rest of these bats are going to be. So I made a little, I don't know if it's a heist involved, but I grabbed it, put it that way. And I'll leave the rest for the readers to find out what went on with it.
Sounds great.
Awesome. That's definitely an awesome story. And as you were saying, you were Mets, Yankees on both, in both organizations in New York, especially with the Yankees, so many winning teams, World Series teams with star players, with a lot of expectations. How did you feel like those clubhouses really handled all of the pressure with New York and the winning, especially with the Yankees? Did you ever find that any guys had any ever tension, or, especially when things weren't going well? I mean, I know with the Mets, like you said in your book that you were a part of that 93 team, which was, I think, the worst team money can buy. Like, was there any tension or ever, or like with all those expectations, how do you feel like clubhouses handled it in New York?
I'll say this, that the 98 team, the 1998 Yankee team was built in a way that the chemistry was optimal. It's general managers try to bring a team together, and most of it is on talent, but also you have to do your homework to try to find out what type of players, what type of guys are these? Are they good teammates? Are they recluse? Do they engage other people? So you try to bring the social aspect together along with the talent. But this group would just meshed so well, and they had a lot of fun. And in a long season as such, 162 games, and in spring training games and playoff games, there's going to be some turmoil too. There's going to be arguments. These are big boys, Yeah. But the main thing is to be able to come together as a unit, as a team, when they cross that line, is to have one goal in mind, and that's to be the last team standing. But as you also mentioned about the positive years and the winning years versus some of the very lean years, especially when I was with the Mets, that it's a very fine line between winning and losing. And a lot of it is leadership, starting from the top, from ownership to the manager, and how that is transcended down to the players. And then internally to having leaders on the team that makes the job of a manager a little bit easier, where the problems are usually not, they don't come to a head. They're taken care of before a fire breaks out. They put the fires out.
Yeah, and Jeff, you mentioned obviously, these leaders were so important for the team's success. And of course, when you were with the Yankees, some of those leaders, obviously everyone thinks of the core four, Mo, Andy, Derek, and Posada. And obviously they were the key to those championship teams. And obviously, being the strength and conditioning coach, you kind of had a different insight and look and how these guys worked and trained, et cetera. So I'm just kind of curious, what stood out, and maybe it was, you want to name one player or all of them, all four of them, what stood out in the way that they trained, and could you see in them, like in the way that they approach training, is that kind of like the way that they approach the game? Is there something about the way that they train that set them apart? Any four of them, or, all four of them?
That's a great question and great comment. And there was that, beginning with that, our winning run there of 98 through 2000, that, as you mentioned, the core four got a lot of headlines and very prominent, but then you have the underlining also stars, but maybe on a little bit different level, of Paul O'Neill, Joe Girardi, Andy Pettit, Tino Martinez, that when it came time, as you mentioned, regarding our workouts and their physical work efforts and their routines, that it transcended through the team, that players would see these guys working hard and they realize, you know what, we better get on the bandwagon here too. We better get involved. If there's anybody that's on the fence whether they should push themselves or not, there was no question that the leadership took over to where we would somewhat intimidate teams. I must say this, that when we would go on the road and after the game, we would have to wait 20 minutes to utilize the other team's workout facility, because at that time they didn't want players to be in the weight room, and might have a couple of guys that don't get along together too well, so things could happen. But we would have sometimes 10 to 12 players that would wait after the game and to go into the visiting team's weight room to work out. And we would go in and just take over. And the other players from other teams would just see the number of players that we had and just how these guys were getting strong and getting at it, even though we probably kicked their rear ends, maybe, 10-2. But here they are, they're not satisfied. They're getting ready for the tomorrow and the next week.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted, you talked about players working out and all that stuff. So I do want to move over to like more of a strength and conditioning front. And especially, you obviously been, following this for a long time, did it for a very long time. What changes did you see occurred throughout your career in how players work out to maybe now with a lot of players maybe trying to muscle up, and the home run ball being such a, vocal point of baseball now? Like, what changes did you see, on that side?
The first changes was the evolution of acceptance of a strength and conditioning program in Major League Baseball. Baseball is a sport that's very slow to accept change, but once that change is accepted, then it's carte blanche. It seems that everybody is getting in line to do it. So in 1984, I was the first strength and conditioning coach in Major League Baseball. And that was soon seen by other teams and started a little bit of a steamroll in that effect. But the facilities that we had to utilize during that early era to be able, we were working out in storage rooms that were just elementary, equipped with a bench and some dumbbells, and you had to get very creative to put a workout together, to the point of in today's game, state-of-the-art facilities, and where the weight room is not shared by the teams. There are separate facilities for the visiting teams to utilize, so there's no downtime. But then you mentioned about possibly players bulking up or really going for the long ball. Everybody's always gone somewhat, it's really sexy to hit home runs. But it's a matter of maintaining, not getting so strong that your connective tissue, your tendons and your ligaments cannot withstand the power and the force that an athlete is generating. So it's a combination of maintaining muscular strength and range of motion, flexibility, but it's such a gray area that you really can't put an answer to it regarding the influx of so many injuries. It's just it's a dynamic sport. It's a powerful sport.
Yeah, and Jeff, just kind of, you just mentioned it a little bit right there. I'm just kind of curious, and you said it's a gray area. Maybe you can kind of give us an hypothesis, but what is it about the game today? I mean, you look at just the Mets and Yankees right here in New York. I mean, you got the Mets with this recently is 17 guys on the IL. The Yankees for several years now have had major injury issues with Stanton, Judge, etc. Is there something in the way that these guys are training? Are they just not? Are they focused too much on the weightlifting? Like, what, in your opinion? I know you said it's kind of a gray area, but do you have any thoughts about why it seems now more than ever injuries is a problem? It doesn't seem like this was happening 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, one point is that I really can't mention, because I really don't know. I'm not there with them. I don't know what type of routine, what type of modalities they're using, what type of poundages they're using, what time of the day are they training, how much rest are they getting. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of intangibles, a lot of common denominators that come together that have to be focused on and to be filled out. And but it seems like every year it's falling through the cracks somehow, some way, especially with the Mets and Yankees, all teams involved. But it seems that the Mets and Yankees are continuously getting hit with oblique, hamstring, rotator cuff activity. And part of it is, like I said, I'm not there anymore to feel it out. I thought we did pretty good, though, when our regime there of Gene Monahan and myself and Steve Donahue, we did a pretty good job.
Yeah, for sure. And just kind of transitioning to your book, I know that you got the foreword for the book by Mariano Rivera. Was there any particular moment you cherished with him specifically? And if maybe it's one moment, maybe it's just Mariano was a person. Is there any something that stands out about him?
Yes, and before I forget, and I'll get to Mariano, but also in this book couldn't have been written without the assistance of my co-author Peter Body with the New York Post, who did a fabulous job of research and of tracking down scores and dates and his input along with this book. But with Mariano, quite a few stories about him, but one that stands out. We were in spring training in Dunedin, Florida. That's where the Blue Jays are playing right now. They're playing their major league games there. But Mariano was going to pitch that day. He was going to pitch one inning. And I just happened to be out in the bullpen seated with him and a lot of young minor leaguers that came along that were going to get their work in that day and pitch. And so they were all huddled around Mariano and asking him questions. And one question is, they asked him, said, Mariano, do you get nervous? How do you handle all the pressure of being out there in these situations? And Mo just said, listen, I was born to do this. I'm very comfortable out there. I'm confident, and I have confidence in myself, and that just to focus and relax and to utilize your your adrenaline flow. Don't channel that nervous energy, channel it to a positive power towards your performance. But he just said it, he talks so smoothly and communicates so well that he puts younger players and even his contemporaries at ease.
Yeah, Jeff. And then I actually just, one last question, if you don't mind. I'm just kind of curious. We hear so much today about the Yankees. What they're missing is George Steinbrenner, who obviously was this titan of baseball. I'm just curious. You mentioned one story, kind of funny. The first time you met him, he said, don't give these guys too much water when you were training down in Florida, which I thought was kind of crazy. But I mean, maybe that's George. But I was just wondering if you could speak to maybe George a little bit, what he was, who he was as a man, maybe that the public doesn't really know about. And if you have any, final thoughts on George and just kind of what he was like as a person.
Yeah, number one, you have to give Mr. Steinbrenner credit, and I thank him for such he was an innovator and not an imitator. To have the insight to hire a person in my capacity and me being lucky enough and to be in the right place at the right time to be the individual that they pick to head up a program, but also just the dynamic personality that George was, that you knew when, let's say, for instance, you're at Yankee Stadium and it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon and you just have a feeling, you knew when George was coming to town, because the maintenance workers would be out mopping the hallways. Things would be just getting spotless. You could feel a surge of getting ready for something, and you knew that George was coming to town. And then the even more tight knit is to be in meetings with him, in staff meetings, that it was just exhilarating, because you never knew what was going to happen. If you're going to get fired, or if you're going to every once in a while get an accolade from him. But he was full of energy. He did a lot of great things behind the scenes to help people out, giving scholarships and paying for educations for people. But he was intense, and he could fire you on the spot too. But definitely, without a doubt, he would do anything to win, just finish on top.
Well, I think that's a great way to end it, especially for our Yankee fans, to hear those final sentiments of what George Steinbrenner felt. So, folks, there it is. Former Yankees and Mets head strength and conditioning coach Jeff Mangold. You can get his book, Power and Pinstripes, My Year's Training, the New York Yankees, where books are sold. Jeff, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Gentlemen, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Continued success to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more of 101 right after the break.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. listener supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York, right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest running sports Scotland show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org.
Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I am Brij Gotham, and I got you covered with the latest headlines. Let's begin with Duke men's basketball coach Mike Krzyzewski, who has announced that he will be retiring after the upcoming 2021-22 season. Coach K has coached the Blue Devils since 1980, leading them to 5 NCAA titles, 12 Final Fours, 15 ACC tournament championships, and 12 ACC regular season titles. In addition, Coach K has led the U.S. national team to 3 Olympic gold medals in 2008, 2012, and 2016 as a head coach. He also served as an assistant coach on the iconic 1992 Dream Team. His resume is arguably the strongest of all time. So guys, how did you react to this news, and what will you remember most from Coach K's legendary coaching career?
My first reaction was good riddance. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not a huge fan of Coach K or Duke. I think Coach K is pretty pompous, to be honest. Look, you lump all these fan bases together: Duke, Lakers, Cowboys, Yankees. Yeah, it was a rough day for the Yankee fans yesterday. They lost, and Coach K retired. It just it's tough. I'm not a huge fan of him. I remember, what was it last year? We're student journalists in a sense, we're student media. Some kid in a post game at Duke, or for the Duke paper, or whatever, asked some innocent question about how do you feel after this loss, whatever. And Kay got all snappy with him and was like, well, how would you feel after you failed your bio test? Who cares? Who just says stuff like that? They're asking you a question. He's always come. I'm just not a huge fan of him. I'm not a huge fan of Duke. That being said, look, when you think college basketball, one of the first things that pops into your mind. He's an iconic coach. Duke is one of the most storied, iconic programs in college basketball history. He's coached some legendary players. Obviously, as Brij, as you mentioned, a lot of titles, accomplishments. So look, college basketball won't be the same without him. It's going to be very different. His assistant, John Shayer, I think is how you say his name, will be replacing him. So interesting to see what happens there. But I'm not going to shed any tears over this. I'm not a big fan of him. So, Andrew, what are your thoughts?
I think, the reason that Duke's, so not likable, and, everyone always gets on them and their fans. And, I'm guilty of that of times. And it's just because they're so successful. And for example, Mike, me, we're all Mets fans. You're a Jets fan. They've won forever. And you have Coach K, who made 12 Final Fours, 5 titles. Then these same fans are Yankee fans who obviously they have all the titles. And, it's at some point you're just why do these guys always win? And, you look at what he did. I didn't realize he was a coach for 42 years. That's a long time. And Mike, as you said, he's basically the face of college basketball right now. When you think of college basketball, you think of Duke, you think of Coach K. He built this perennial winner that, when you think of college basketball, you think of Duke. And this year when they weren't, right in the thick of it, you were like, what happened to Duke? But it was literally 1 year. I mean, he's obviously an awesome coach. He led that team for, I think for a very long time, ton of wins, tons, you can name all the accolades. But, I think now, he must be, he doesn't, he doesn't look that old, but I guess he must be obviously on the older side.
He's 74.
Yeah. At a certain point, you can't coach forever. And like you said, he was pompous. Maybe towards the end of the career, he was getting more like that.
He was always like that.
Yeah, I think it was more though now, and I think especially now, the type of players may not be as maybe he's kind of maybe a little past what the way basketball's played now, even college basketball, and I guess maybe that's why he kind of knew it was time to go. And credit to Duke for having, I think, a really good succession plan in place, like John Shayer. I like that they stayed in-house. I like that because Duke, they're always going to get the recruits. They're always going to get all the the high players, the national attention. And I like that, a lot of programs, they go outside, they try to get the big name when they probably don't need to. And especially Shea used to play for Duke, was an assistant for a long time. I really like that move. And, for all the, the great players that, came through that Duke program, I mean, it's just really super impressive what Coach K did.
Yeah, I know. I like what both of you guys said there. I love Mike's point about, grouping all the bandwagon teams into sort of one, the Yankees, the Cowboys, the Lakers, there's Duke. And I think to that point, they're very easy to hate if you're not a fan of one of those teams, if you're not a real fan. Yeah, Patriots, right? Throw them in there. We could go on forever. I mean, there's so many that the Warriors for the last 5 years when they had Kevin Durant. Yeah. People just becoming fans because they're going to win it all. But when you look at Duke, I mean, yeah, they're easy to hate. Coach K, he can be annoying just because they're always in the tournament, with the exception of last year, which was the first time I think they missed since 95. He's been there for 40 years. I'm not sure how many he missed, but I'm going to assume it was less than 5.
Last time Duke didn't make the tourney was 2017. So I think, wait, what?
No.
Yeah. It wasn't
Zion at that time.
Zion in 2017. I'm looking it up right now.
Okay, I think it's 95, but I could be mistaken. But if you don't mind pulling up that stat. But again,
I don't know why I thought 2017, but I probably am wrong. I don't claim to be a. Keep talking. I'm looking.
Sure. Duke's been around for a long time, and Coach K, I mean, he's been around for so long. He was facing off against Michael Jordan in the 80s. He's seen all of these players go on to the NBA, some of the great players that have gone through his system. Yeah. College, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, college basketball won't be the same without him. College basketball is always evolving. It's always
it was sorry, Brij. The last time they didn't make the tourney was 95. You're right. I was looking at the year above is because they listed the Sweet 16. That was a lot. They didn't make the Sweet 16 in 2017. That's what.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Sure. I guess, yeah. And I mean, just sort of to close, I mean, Coach K has had one of the greatest runs of all time as a coach. I mean, this guy goes to the Olympics and coaches all the best NBA players, wins 3 gold medals there, was with the Dream Team for a while. It's just, I mean, I don't know if you guys have anything else to add.
He has 16 Elite Eight appearances.
I mean,
that's crazy.
Like him or not, this guy is, I mean, you can throw him up there for the GOAT of college basketball coaches.
I was just going to say the one thing I think is kind of interesting is how, I was actually on the one-on-one that was right after when Roy Williams retired. So now it's kind of interesting to see.
Yeah.
Like when I think of one of them, I always think of the other guy. I always think of Coach K and Roy Williams together. Of course, Duke UNC rivalry. So, obviously, also Roy Williams had a long career at Kansas too, which is, unlike K, who was with Duke basically the whole time. But, it's weird now that they're both gone. Like they both retire in the same season, very similar. Their assistants are going to take over for them. I think that's just kind of crazy how when you think of college basketball now, I mean, the two of the icons are basically gone. I mean, sure there's still iconic coaches left. I mean, Calipari and Jay Wright, somewhat iconic, and Izzo, I think, is pretty iconic, but it's hard to top, Coach K. And I will say also the USA basketball. I mean, of course, we all love the United States basketball, so props to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. And last year's season was weird. I mean, aside from the COVID things, Duke not being in the tournament, I think North Carolina being an 8 or a 9 seed, they're usually up closer to a 2, 3, even a 1. Yeah, and losing. Right. So very unusual season. Sort of a changing of the guard situation here where out with the old, in with the new, as they say. And I think if we shift gears sort of to our next headline in the NBA, you look at the Celtics and what they're doing. Danny Ainge, longtime president of basketball operations for the Celtics, announced his retirement following, the team's first round exit against the Brooklyn Nets earlier this week. Ainge has been with the team since 2003. He's probably most known for making the big move to acquire Allen and Garnett, joining Paul Pierce to form, I guess you can call the first modern big three. And they won a title in their first season. And I'd say Ainge deserves a lot of credit for constructing that team. But since 2008, the Celtics haven't risen another banner. They're one of the most storied franchises in NBA history, but they have just one championship in the last 35 years. So I guess with Ainge stepping down, Brad Stevens, he will be moving into from his coaching role into the front office. What do you guys make of this move? Is Brad Stevens suited to be a team executive? And I guess who could potentially fill this head coaching void?
I think this is such an interesting story because I think, first of all, Brad Stevens going to GM, like who would have saw that coming? I think that's kind of, the first thing that everyone goes to. But like Danny Ainge, like to me, and I guess maybe this is true, but like I feel like after you win a title, you buy yourself probably 10 years. And, that's kind of true in this take, a little more than 10 years. And like Ainge and, the Celtics have always gotten close, and they're always like that second best team. They've always been solid for the most part. I mean, here and there, they've had a few bad years, but they're always like, I mean, even now, they're like the 2 seed or the 3 seed. They just never break through. They never got, look, they had the Kyrie and it didn't really work out, but they never had like a top 5, apex player that's going to win you a title really since they added that big 3. And now, it's like I think they need that player, especially in today's NBA. We've been talking about it a lot this show. They needed that shakeup. Ainge obviously couldn't get it done. And now it's, Brad Stevens, he goes into that role. And I don't know if he can do that, to be quite honest with you, either. I mean, obviously he's never been a GM, but he was like the coach of, that Butler program. So obviously I guess you kind of have some like GM type roles as a head of a program, a college program with recruiting guys, stuff like that. So maybe it'll work out. I don't really like you can't really judge it right now because maybe Stevens will be really good. Maybe Stevens will be really bad in this, president of basketball operations role. I remember Phil Jackson, when he came to the Knicks, everyone was so happy. They thought he would bring him back and it would have been great. And it was probably the worst hire of all time. So you just don't know, with these types of roles, maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. I'm not going to judge it yet until that happens. We'll see, who now takes over the head coaching role. That's going to be really interesting. I think Jason Kidd's, rumored in it. So again, it'll be really interesting, I think, to kind of see how that situation works out. But I wasn't expecting, Brad Stevens to take over as president of basketball operations.
Yeah, I would say that it was a shock. I was shocked. I mean, it seems like for a lot of the Celtics had a very disappointing year this year. They went to the Eastern Conference Finals in the bubble. They fell short against the Heat. Honestly, I think Boston was. It's debatable. I think they maybe were the better team. And then this year they come in. I think there was high expectations for them to be one of the best teams in the East. They're the 7 seed. They had to do the play-in tournament. I mean, it was a very down year for them. So I think there was a lot of talk actually of, hey, is Brad Stevens done as coach? Yeah. Like there was talk of like, are we just going to fire Brad Stevens? Even a little bit of buzz of maybe is Danny Ainge like clearing the whole house. But instead what they do is they let Danny Ainge, I think he's kind of being forced out, if I'm being perfectly honest. And, Brad Stevens is like ascending to the role. And it's baffling to me. Now, I'm not a Celtics fan. I could care less what this organization does. But, when you think about it, first of all, looking at Danny Ainge's, tenure as, president of basketball operations, honestly, let's be honest, it was disappointment. I mean, you assembled this big 3 of Allen, Garnett, and Pierce. You had Rondo there too. And like to only get one title out of it, I know it was tough. And towards the end there, you had LeBron with the Heat and everything, but and obviously Kobe was with the Lakers and those finals matchups, whatever. But like to only get one title out of it, I get it's the NBA, but just that in and of itself is a little disappointing. And then you look at stuff like they got Al Horford, they got Kyrie Irving, they got Gordon Hayward. And I know Gordon had the terrible injury, and I know, all this other stuff. And Kyrie, of course, had his own off the court, all that kind of things. But again, that didn't really work out. And then for years and years and years, we heard all about the young talent that Boston was bringing in. They got Marcus Smart, they got Jaylen Brown, they got Jason Tatum, Jason Tatum is probably one of the best young players in the league. If not, he's really right up there. Yeah. And they so far have done nothing with that. And it just seems like every year there's always all this promise, this hype with the Celtics. And of course, they're one of, if not the most storied team in NBA history. And again, I mean, as a Knicks fan, I can't knock this, but only one title in the last 25 years. And that for the Celtics is not like what you want. And so it's just a disappointing year. And then for Brad Stevens, who frankly is not qualified for this job, I get that he orchestrated a program at Butler, but what has he done to deserve to be an executive? Like he doesn't even have any accolades as a head coach. He didn't win anything. He was the All-Star game head coach. That was good enough for you people. Like it makes no sense to me. And I'm kind of going to rant here, but the move is just, it's baffling. And apparently actually the Woj tweeted out or said that Stevens actually welcomed this move, that he's really worn down coaching and that like he wants, whether that's to save face. I don't, it's just really strange to me. And I don't get why a 44-year-old guy, maybe he's worn down, but he's young. To me, I see this as like, I know it's different sport, kind of different circumstances, but Bill Parcells was coach of the Jets and then he retired to become the GM. And then he quit and then became a coach again with the
Oh,
Cowboys. And I think that's honestly what could happen here. But maybe Stevens really does want the job. I know it was kind of a lot of information there, but it's just such a baffling move.
Yeah, baffling, I think, is exactly what I was thinking, because as you said, based on Stevens's recent performance, the Celtics' recent performance, I saw him on the way out, but not on the way up to the GM role. I saw him potentially being fired or to mutually part ways with the team. That's what I saw happening, because the last 10 years for the Celtics, as you said, it's been kind of weird. Ainge made that move to get all the picks from Brooklyn. And later, everyone was like, oh, he finessed the Nets. He got all these great picks. And he did. He turned those picks into Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, all these great stars. Then they have that remarkable season where they pushed the Cavs to 7 games without Kyrie and Gordon Hayward. So there was this idea of, oh, we bring those guys back next year. We're basically a championship team. But then chemistry issues, injury issues, they're never able to work it out. And although Ainge keeps trying to retool it, he gets Kemba. The Celtics can't seem to put it all together. And I think that now is definitely the right time for them to sort of make a change in the front office. Ainge has had it. Andrew made a great point of, you really get 10 years after a championship. And after that, it's sort of, if you can't make it happen, you're sort of, you don't really have an excuse at that point. Right. So I guess to close here, Brad Stevens, we'll see how he does as an executive. Really interesting because, again, doesn't have any experience or very minimal experience in that sort of role. So I'm rooting for him again because just, as a young guy who's going into a new job, you wish the best for him, but we'll see what happens. And to close our headlines, we have one more talking about something a little bit different, talking about Johnny Football, who hasn't really been in the news for some time, but he was on an interview with Barstool Sports on a podcast, and he talked about, and I quote, he made somewhat of a decent living by selling autographed items while at Texas A&M. And he said that he didn't take $1 until after he won the Heisman, which was in 2012. And he also said that the autographs netted him about $33,000. So I guess, gents, how do we feel about this? Is it just another Johnny Football incident? Is it, more of a common practice? I mean, we kind of know that it is, but how widespread is the taking of legal money for autographs? What do you guys really think about that? And is it a problem?
Well, I thought the story itself was interesting. Like the way that it was set up, it was like, oh, they told me to go like this hotel room and all the stuff was just there. And then I signed it and then I opened up a safe and then it was like really sneaky. I mean, obviously to avoid any entanglements. Look, it's not surprising at all. We all know that college athletes, especially the stars, make a lot of money under the table. I mean, we see stuff like, not even just like, I like remember the whole Reggie Bush situation and just like different guys make money different ways. And it's just like, this is not surprising at all. I just think, classic Johnny, like he's an idiot for just like saying this out loud. Like obviously his shot at ever playing professional football, let alone NFL. He did play.
He wants to.
He doesn't want to, but last thing he did was that stupid, like, real life Madden thing where it was like the fans choose the players or whatever. So he's not trying to play football, whatever. He doesn't care. But like, he's just the fact that like, it's just like, why would you come out and say that? And just, I guess people don't like him anyway. It looks bad already, but it's just stupid. And the only thing that can come out of it is the NCAA. Like, I don't think they will, but like, what, take away his Heisman, take away like stupid things. I don't like it. Just, there's no benefit to doing other than just Johnny being stupid. And also the idea that this guy who just has a toxic personality was like a first round draft pick that some team consider could be a franchise leader. What was the Browns? But this just is hilarious to me.
Yeah. I mean, that it's like, I mean, like the whole situation, like, as you were saying, like first he only did it for 3,000. And then like he was signing the stuff and then like someone came up to him, supposedly was like, you can get 30,000 for this. And then he went for 30,000. Like that whole story was just, I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm assuming like a lot of athletes do this and like, you really can't play, like, especially in Johnny Football's case, like his best years were literally the 2 years he started at A&M. Because I mean, and I'm assuming he probably, made off of that. Because now, like, no one wants a Johnny Football sign something, like it's worth nothing. So, like, strike why the iron is hot. Like, I don't blame him for that. And like, I mean, I bet a lot of college athletes, that had really the first time they're seeing this type of money. I mean, even 30,000. Like he was saying, that the stipends were like $300 or $350. Like, I mean, a lot of athletes are definitely going to be. You're thinking like I can make a lot more. Like even that, who's hosting the podcast, Taylor Lewan, who plays left tackle for the Titans. It's like a players podcast. And then he was like, yeah, I mean, like I get free meals all the time, which you're not really supposed to do either. But like, and he was an offensive lineman. So it's like, it definitely probably happens, a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the money under the table with college sports is sort of, it's been a thing for a long time. They keep it under wraps. It's just sort of part of the game. It's also kind of a way, I know schools will toss money at people trying to get them to come, we'll give you this money, we'll send this money to your family. And for a lot of players, unfortunately, they need the money. So they, they'll bite at the risk, and, hopefully they're able to avoid the consequences of such an action. But again, I think this is just another Johnny football, him going on and just saying
he doesn't care
something
anymore.
Stupid.
He's
What is he, 27 now? He's out of the league for years, was barely even made an impact with the Browns. I mean, I don't really remember. Was he there for a season?
I just remember one of my few memories of Johnny on the Browns was they played the Jets like week 1 in 2015. And I remember Josh McCown got hurt because he was a starter. So Johnny got in. And I just remember like Lorenzo Molden, who the Jets drafted, who's going to be this big pass rusher, ended up being a bust out of Louisville. Was it Louisville? I think it was. Anyway, like he just like knocked Johnny out basically, and Johnny fumbled and it was returned for a touchdown. So that's basically when I think of Johnny and his failures with the Browns. But I think that's going to do it for our headline segment. A lot of interesting stuff to cover here. So a big thank you to our own Brij Gotham for those headlines. Great stuff as always. We're starting to wind things down here on 101. We got our final hour here, but still 2 more great segments to go. Next up, we're going to talk about Naomi Osaka and her decision to withdraw from the French Open. But first up, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to 101 on 90.7 FM.
One-on-One has a brand new YouTube channel. Subscribe to WFUV Sports to catch our simulcast Saturday nights and get notifications so you never miss another show. Miss the show? You can find on-demand segments, interviews, and highlights every week. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics. .118 here on WFUV. You're listening to One-on-One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I am Michael Legan, joined alongside, of course, by Andrew Gulata. We're, slowly going through the evening here. We're kind of winding things down in our final hour. And, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about now Naomi Osaka, now who, of course, this week withdrew from the French Open, citing mental health struggles, for her own betterment. She felt it was best for her to not compete in the competition. So obviously, tennis isn't everyone's sport, but so I just figured it'd be best if we do a little bit of a timeline. And then Andrew, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So of course, last week, Osaka said that she would not be participating in media sessions at the French Open, citing her mental health.
She said, quote, "I've often felt that people have no regard for athletes' mental health, and this rings true whenever I see press conference or partake in one," unquote. She also said, quote, "We're often sat there and asked questions that we've been asked multiple times before, or asked questions that bring doubt into our minds, and I'm not just going to subject myself to people that doubt me," unquote. So, I think that was a pretty powerful statement. I mean, she was kind of calling out, she later apologized and said she didn't mean to call it the media per se, but she was raising a valid point, which is that, and I've seen it, and I'm sure you've seen it. There are times in press conferences where, athletes are kind of asked unfair questions or questions that kind of, I could see why an athlete would feel that they're being bring down. Like, it's easy for us as fans and media to kind of sit here and answer the question, but after you have a bad performance, something to like have someone harp on that, I could see why she would cite that. So anyway, so she brings that up. She's one participating in media. So then later last week, May 30th, Osaka was fined $15,000 by the organization that runs the French Open, that runs the Grand Slams, for refusing to participate in media sessions. And then after all of that, on Monday, Osaka said that So on Monday, she said she was going to be fined. They threatened to suspend her if she wasn't going to participate, which is, pretty intense and kind of a little much in my opinion. And then she eventually withdrew from the Open after they threatened her with the fines and the suspensions. And, she once again emphasized her mental health. She said, quote, "She suffered long bouts of depression," unquote. She said, quote, "The best thing for the tournament, for the other players, and my well-being is that I withdraw so that everyone get back to focusing on the tennis going on in Paris. I never wanted to be a distraction and accept that my timing was not ideal and my message could have been clearer," unquote. She also talked a lot about how like she battles a lot with anxiety and, she feels a lot of stress from public speaking. So I know it's a lot to kind of take in, but, Andrew, your initially, and we'll talk more about the reaction as well, but your initial thoughts on her statements and her decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think tennis is like an interesting one because it's like a single sport. So I mean, team's a little different when you have multiple guys. I think usually like the coach usually goes up by himself, but usually players maybe they go together, and like that could obviously be different. But tennis, you're by yourself, and there's no really coach either. So like every decision's on you, and you're going to get asked all those bad questions. And I mean, it must be daunting for a single athlete with like you're not playing with a team, you don't have anyone else really to go on. You're going in a reporter with, I'm assuming at the French Open, there's probably a lot of reporters in the room, or I guess now the Zoom room or whatever. And I could definitely see how that causes, a lot of anxiety. And especially if the questions are, berated or like, as she was saying, like multiple, I could definitely, see where she's coming from. And then suspend someone for not wanting to, I don't really understand like, how that like makes a ton of sense, but it's just interesting, I think, because, I think athletes have been doing these press conferences with a ton of people in the room, for basically ever. And like, it's always been basically because that's the way that, reporters got to put it, some quotes in their articles. And that's basically how fans or, other common people learned about, or got this information. And just now it's completely different. You have a lot of other forms of media than, a beat reporter or whatever. And that's maybe something where, could be used for the betterment of, covering these athletes. I mean, like, I feel like the best, like sound bites from athletes, like the best and the most honest they are is like usually like one-on-one or podcasting where maybe it's a small group of people. And like, those are kind of the most interesting interviews. Now, obviously that would be a little hard to do, like after a tennis match or whatever, but like, it's definitely something that I think people have to look at and be like, look, if she doesn't want to speak to, 75 people or whatever, just about her performance, because there's no coach, there's no anyone else, like you definitely have to respect that.
Yeah, well, first off, you hit the nail on the head there with the tennis is so isolating. I mean, it's literally you are by yourself, you are alone, you are the center of attention. I mean, when you're playing tennis, it's deadly quiet, all eyes on you. I mean, you could understand why someone would. I mean, just the fact that there's no way to deflect. I mean, like NFL, the let's say the quarterback has a bad game, well, the coach can go out there and take the heat and bring it off of them and whatever, or the O lineman, the center can say, hey, that was on me, whatever, we didn't block well enough, whatever. Tennis player, it's all about you. And like you said, it's just, you can understand why they would feel so much pressure and heat. And also, like you said as well, the fact that the media landscape is so different. This is not like 1945 when it was newspapers and radio and that's it. And they needed the interviews and whatever. It's so much easier for an athlete to get information out. Now, we're media, like I respect and this is also brought up like a lot of journalists saying, look, we need access, which I totally appreciate. and totally respect, First Amendment. We need to get the word out to the people. And, it's a hard balance to strike, because on the one hand, the idea that they're going to fine her $15,000 and maybe suspend her because she's legitimately dealing with an issue and like this is how she has to cope with it is absurd. Like, would you rather force her to do something and just make it worse? Depression is not something that you want to play around with someone. And, God forbid, like if she was suicidal, like that's insane to think about. And, the fact that they're just saying, well, she's got to do the media, like get some perspective here. But that being said, I understand that they want the players to interact. So it's such a tough balance to strike. I'm not so sure what the answer is, but I do think that, it's important that we realize that, athletes are people. And I said this in the opening of the show, like the athletes are, they're just like us, except we tend to put them on a pedestal because they're on TV or they're really good. They have these great gifts. And so, maybe the answer is like like a minimum of like, I don't know, 10 media appearances a year or something. Maybe like, it's not like you have to speak every time, but like, you got to give some access. I don't know what the solution would be, but it's a tricky situation.
Yeah. I mean, like, I agree. There has to be access. I mean, like, that's, like, as you said, like, that's the basis, and like the people deserve to, like, let's say you're a fan and like, you want to hear what they had to say after the games. That's like, or the matches or whatever. That's definitely, I think very valid. And like, there probably should, like, as you said, maybe you just like do something else. Maybe it's a different medium or whatever. Like I know a lot of athletes are obviously experimenting with whether it's podcast or whether it's, something else like a Instagram Live or whatever. And maybe that's something, because I've seen that as well. Or like even like players like interacting on Twitter. Like, I mean, like I know Trevor May, after every time the Mets win, let's go Mets, hashtag LFGM. And like, I don't know what it, ends up being, but like, yeah, like, and sometimes the hard questions need to be asked, but like berating someone, like, I mean, especially with her, she has like a ton of talent. It's like been extremely successful. Like, I mean, like, to me, it's like sometimes it's, especially with single sports, because like I played golf in high school. And like when you hit a bad shot, like you can't, like you could blame it on the coach or whatever. Like, you hit a bad shot, like, and you have to explain that through someone that, I could see like a professional being like, well, I just hit, a not so good one there. So I could see that definitely being more difficult, but it'll be interesting to see maybe how media changes, doesn't change, going to the future, especially with technology being different. Like you talk about that Johnny Manziel quote. I don't think that would have happened if it was, a different, just basically two other NFL players talking to him in a very informal manner. Like that's something maybe you bring up too. I don't know. It's definitely a very interesting dynamic, and I'm probably not going to be the one to fix it. You're probably not either, but it's definitely interesting to talk about.
Yeah. And also I think it's important to note, like, the amount of support that Osaka received.
Exactly.
I mean, athletes, celebrities, I mean, just Steph Curry, Russell Wilson, the Williams sisters, Venus and Serena, Billie Jean King, even like Will Smith, who's not an athlete, famous actor, but they all came out in support of Naomi Osaka, which I just really think speaks to the fact that, everyone agrees, like this is an important issue. And I think the Open and the Grand Slam, organization, just, they're pretty short-sighted in their move here. And obviously there's a balance that needs to be struck, but it was really refreshing to see the support that she got, to know that, it's probably good for her as well to know that she hadn't done, because I think you could see in her second statement that she definitely felt some regret about how like she like her statement regarding the media and stuff. And it was nice to see that she heard get that support, because like we said, in this sport where she's so alone, to have the biggest athletes from around the world come out. And also I think it's interesting, when we think of media, like, we're kind of biased because, we're in the United States, we think of like football, baseball, basketball, and a lot of the media that covers teams aside from like the playoffs, big games, is very local media. It's smaller, but like you think about tennis, there's like 4 Grand Slams, and tennis, like maybe not in the United States as much, but hugely popular internationally. I mean, it's popular in the US as well, but like the media scrums, and now it's over Zoom, but like are insane with the sport like tennis, because you have people from all over the world coming. It's not like you go to a Devils game and you got the guy from NJ.com and me from WMTV and MSG, and that's about it. Like you got all these people. So I think that makes it even worse. I can understand why it's so like it provokes her, anxiety so much. But also the Calm app, which I'm sure everyone has seen commercials for and advertisements for. It's like it's supposed to help you relax and like sleep and stuff like that. They came out and actually said they would pay the fines of Osaka and any other tennis athlete who refused to speak to the media due to mental health concerns. Now, of course, I'm sure this was a marketing, move for them to like get their name out there, but that was somewhat interesting. And also, like you think about like the other athletes that we've heard, like Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan, Dak Prescott, all recent years, even like a guy like Stephen A. Smith, who we think of as like, always there for like crazy stuff. Like they've all talked about like mental health. So I think it's reassuring that like, it seems the conversation around mental health has kind of changed. And it's nice to know that all these athletes are being very open and honest about themselves.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like you talk about like open, honest, other athletes, like especially like I think the NBA like so star driven, like Steph Curry probably sees it. And like, especially Osaka, I mean, she's very, very young. I mean, I think, was she 23 or like, that's a really, I mean, look, I just turned 20. Like, I can't imagine like getting all this. And she's probably had a ton of, it wasn't just like, this is the first time she's been, in the microscope. She has been through the last few years that she's, becoming one of the best tennis players in the world. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic. And, I know they're young players, obviously, in a ton of other sports. And, it's just definitely something when you're by yourself, and also international media, like you were saying, the local media, like, especially I think like with the local beat or whatever, they really understand the team. They know all the players, have been watching every game. And like, you get to those national, especially like I think baseball, they get to like the nationally broadcast games that everyone's like, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just, and that's probably the same thing with these international people. Like, unless you're following every tournament that these tennis players have played in, like you probably don't know, everything they've been through. So, or, all their matches or whatever. So I could definitely see that side of the story too, because I think even as like a Mets fan, like you're saying, oh, this game's on ESPN. They don't know what the Mets, they're saying that they're, whatever, something about their player that they, maybe aren't as knowledgeable about. So I could definitely kind of see that side of the story as well.
Yeah. And also, kind of interesting on a related note. I mean, we not only has this brought up about how does media treat fans, I think also treat players,
Yeah.
Media. Yeah. They don't like the fans either, but, how fans treat players. And obviously, it's different, but we've seen like in the NBA playoffs, just like absurd treatment of players. I mean, the popcorn on Russ, the spitting on Trae Young, the guy who stormed the court against the Sixers. And the worst one, of course, was the water bottle that got thrown at Kyrie. And it's like, there's no excuse. Like I hear people like, well, people have been cooped up inside for so long so that they're acting crazy. I was like, so wait, it was okay to throw a water bottle like before too? Like it's just, there's no excuse for this type of behavior. And it's a few bad apples. Most fans, they go to a game, they're very respectful. They don't do anything crazy, but like, I hope that, and look, I'm a very passionate guy. I go crazy at sporting events, Mets, Jets, especially, like I lose my mind, but like at the end of the day, I hope it's like, I hope people like be respectful. Like don't do something that you wouldn't want your mother to see you doing or something, like don't like embarrass yourself publicly. And it's like, not only should the media treat players with respect, and vice versa. There have been players that disrespected media, Ryan Leaf, knock it off, all that stuff like that. Or I like Bobby Bonilla and stuff like that. But it's just like the fans too have to realize like, it's great to be back, but don't be stupid.
Yeah. And like, let's just not throw things at people. I don't know. Yeah. It's like not a kindergarten classroom where you're throwing blocks around. I mean, like, at a certain point, I just think like it's you can't make the excuse that they're being like cooped up. Like I'll give a perfect example. Like when the Mets were in the World Series in 2015, it was the first time forever they were in it. Everyone was extremely excited. And then I was at the game where Murphy made the error to basically lose the game. Went right through his legs, easy play. No one was, he probably heard the boos, but no one was throwing things at him. It's just like, some like, and this is obviously, that's not an excuse just because you're excited.
It's a little harder on the baseball field to get that range.
That's true. But think about like the Chase Utley thing. Like everyone was booing him. Like, and he was right on the foul line. I guess if someone wants to throw something at him, they probably could have. And like, you can't make that excuse that you're excited because your team's in the playoffs and you're cooped up. Like, fans get excited when their teams make the championship. Like think about the Cubs winning their, first championship or being there for the first time in like a billion years. Like they didn't like throw things at the Indians players. So it's like, I mean, I don't think you can, it's not a good excuse that you were just like overly cooped up in it. It makes no sense. There's nothing else I can say about it.
Well, I think you made one statement in there that we can all agree with. Chase Utley's the worst. Okay. So we can all get around that. We all don't like Chase Utley unless you're Philly, but we're not going to talk about Philly fans on a New York show. So I think that's a great way to wrap up our segment. Well, it's a little after 1:30 in the morning here. We got one more segment to go. So stick with us because after this quick break, we're going to be breaking down the NBA playoffs. A lot to get to. Brij is going to come back in. We're going to do a little, triple discussion here. You're listening to One on One.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
We're back here on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. We're here in our final segment. We're wrapping up the evening as we approach the 2 a.m. hour. I'm here with my main man, Andrew Gulata. We're also joined now by Brij, who gave us some great headlines. So to wrap up tonight's show, let's talk some NBA playoffs. There's a lot to get to, different things, different players, different matchups, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the first things I want to talk about is the Lakers, because they got LeBron's first time in his career, first round exit. In our last show a few weeks ago, well, the last show that I was on, I had said that the Lakers were contenders, and maybe I shouldn't have gotten that far, but the thing is, though, the Lakers were up 2-1 in the series, and then AD got hurt and they went down. So there's a lot to break down here. Let's start off with Andrew. Your thoughts on the Lakers' first round exit, and what are any other takeaways that you got?
Yeah, so I said they were pretenders, and I had the Suns as my contenders, and I'm a big fan of the Suns. I like CP3 and Booker and what they're doing for sure. But the Lakers, I think, with AD and LeBron at full strength, I think obviously they're a championship team. They won the championship last year. This year, they both guys were hurt. The depth wasn't as good, and they just ran out of gas after going so deep in the bubble last year. So, yes, you talk about how they were up 2-1, but then AD got hurt. But that was kind of almost bound to happen. You don't want to say an injury is bound to happen, but both of them were banged up. AD was coming back from another injury earlier in the year, and who knows, if he was fully healthy, just trying to push it for the playoffs. And then he gets hurt again, and then he tries to come back in Game 6, and obviously wasn't ready because he was taken out of that game very early on, and that was that. And the Suns are no pushover either. It's not like they were playing a bad team. It's not like they were the 2 seed playing like an 8 seed. Or a 7 seed. They were, playing a Suns team that to me is championship caliber, or right around there. Definitely the class of the Western Conference, or one of the teams that's the class of the Western Conference. And I think you put all that together, and it's just it ends up being a bad year for the Lakers. But I don't think it's like panic. LeBron, I don't think he loses his legacy or whatever just because he lost 1 year in the first round. I think it happens to a lot of guys, and especially I think after the bubble, I'm going to give them a break because they had a 2-month break coming into this year and playing another long season. So we'll see next year if LeBron still, and AD doesn't work out again, then maybe, you can talk about it. Right now, I'm not overreacting until this team next year has a lot of trouble and doesn't work out, which I predict probably won't be the case.
Yeah, I think you said a lot of good things there. They had 2 months of an off season. I mean, that is very unusual. Yeah. I mean, you look at both the Heat and the Lakers going out in the first round this year. They were both in the finals last year. A number of factors contributed to that. A lot of haters and people that look at headlines will say, oh, they're just bubble teams. They can't, they're not built, a lot of jokes. There was people calling Anthony Davis a Disney because they played at the Orlando bubble last year. LaMickey for Mickey Mouse, Disney World. A lot of jokes, but in reality, the Lakers were really banged up this year. They lacked depth at the center position. They lost to Dwight Howard. They lost JaVale McGee. I'm sorry, but Marc Gasol just cannot really play great in the post. He can shoot occasionally. He's slow. He's not mobile at all. They brought in Andre Drummond, but he clearly just doesn't really fit into their style of play, I guess is the best way of putting it. And Anthony Davis missed significant time. LeBron missed significant time. And I think that if they were hurt earlier in the season, they wouldn't have been rushed back in the same time frame. I think those injuries were longer term, but because the playoffs came up, they had to play. I think when you look at LeBron's legacy, it's pretty impressive. 14 first round wins, I believe. This is his first loss. So Yeah, it's a loss, but I mean, you kind of have to look at it like, wow, he's won 14 times. That's really great. I don't think it really is going to put a stain on his legacy. I know all the big talk shows will be like, oh, did this, put the nail in the coffin that Michael Jordan is the greatest, different eras. This is one argument. This, we can talk about it, forever. But I think that LeBron at age 36 in year 18, what he's been able to do to still play at a reasonably high level, I think it's very impressive. Lakers went out early. I actually thought they weren't going to go out to the Suns, but the Suns, I think with this win, shows that I think they're my favorite to come out of the West now. I was saying that whoever won that series, it also comes down to the Clippers Mavs game tomorrow. I think if the Clippers move on, they could also have a good shot at moving on. So lots of moving parts here, but definitely a lot of fun in the Western Conference side of the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think this whole narrative that like LeBron is wild, like it's so annoying because you go on Twitter and you see like it's obviously all like these LeBron haters, like these Nick fan pages and like all these other people. Like it's just like you're so like you just love to hate LeBron. It's like first, oh, he's done, oh, he's over with. Like just stop. Like he's so not
It's like Brady last year.
It's like, can you give exactly?
Yeah.
I think we talked about it in the pre-production meeting. It's exactly the same thing. What did Brady do when I won the Super Bowl? And I'm not counting out LeBron until the guy, can't walk anymore or has like 3 or 4 bad years. I mean, the simple fact is the guy missed, how many games did he miss this year? Like 20 something games,
like a third of the season. Yeah.
Yeah, because of like the high ankle sprain. Which, by the way, to be perfectly honest, I still don't think he really recovered from that. He just wasn't driving the same way. He didn't look the same.
He was pretty passive.
I mean, he obviously wasn't the same guy. He clearly hasn't recovered. So number one. Number two, like I love LeBron. I think he's honestly my favorite player of all time. I'm a LeBron guy, but like the simple fact is, yeah, I'm putting it out there. I don't care. It's true. I if you didn't know that, I'm a LeBron guy. But the bottom line is LeBron needs shooters around him. I mean, you think about when he's at the Heat, Ray Allen, all this other stuff. Like he needs their best 3-point shooter was KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Like, and he was terrible. Like they had no shooters on this team. Dennis Schroeder was terrible. Kyle Kuzma should be sent to the moon. Like literally, this team was awful. And I'm sorry, when AD and LeBron are both healthy, well, I don't think either of them were that healthy. But you saw what happened. They went up 2-1. And as soon as AD went out, that's when they started to crumble. And I don't think LeBron is the same without him. It was sad to see. But I'm not counting LeBron out. The shortened off season, the injury, there's just so many reasons that can explain why this team was what they were. And all these LeBron haters counting him out, get ready for next season when he comes in and he runs like a steamroller over your team. I mean, I'm not counting him out yet.
But like, the funny thing is like, let's say he comes out next year and like he wins a title, it comes really close, has an amazing year. Then it'll be like flipped. Like he's better than Jordan. He's the best. It's kind of the same thing with Brady too. Like everyone was hating on Brady last year. And now this year they think he's like a top 5 QB yet. Like again, like when last year they were saying he was like 15th best, like just pick a side.
Yeah. And it's like, it's like all the LeBron haters, like, oh, he lost in the first round. Like, oh yeah, who also lost in the first round? Kobe. And like but you don't want to talk about that. Like, it's just the pick and choose. And my other thing is like, can't they all just be great? Can't we just like all say they're great? Why does one have to be like only in basketball is this debate like so intense? You really don't see this in any other sport. But let's move over to the other team that shares the Staples Center in LA, and that would be the Clippers, who of course have had a very hotly contested series with the Mavericks, back and forth. It seemed like I chose the Clippers as pretenders because they're choke artists. And frankly, I seem to be right for a bit, and I may still be right. Let's see how game 7 goes, which of course will take place Sunday afternoon, 3:30 Eastern time, or Eastern time. Yeah, I think it is. I don't know, whatever. It'll be on a Sunday. Well, it seemed early for the West Coast game, but whatever.
Yeah.
So Kawhi just went off in game 6, 18 to 25. Score 45 points. It's just insane. So thoughts on Kawhi, thoughts on the Clippers? Brij, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the Clippers are a weird team because they had the whole choke in the bubble last year, the pandemic P jokes. They come back this year. They have a pretty good season. They fall a couple spots at the end of the season. They, apparently they were tanking so they wouldn't have to face the Lakers in the first round, which honestly probably would have gone fine for them considering how the Lakers played the Suns. But this has been a weird series because the road team has won every game, which is, I don't think that's ever happened, or it's only ever happened a couple of times. Dallas won the first two, and I honestly thought maybe they were going to sweep them because Paul George just was playing atrociously. Or even, he even had a couple 20, 30-point games, but his team around him, and they weren't playing up to speed, basically. But then Clippers come back, they win two more, and then it's 1-1, and now we're up 3-3 going to a game 7. Yeah, I honestly think that if the Clippers win this, they could come out of the West. I think that when you look at two superstars, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, like that's a team that's built to win it all. And I think Luka is just so special. He's been able to push the series beyond what most analysts and predictors really thought that it would go. But even if Luka loses, what he's done, and I think his second or third season now, is just remarkable. And he is going to be the face of the league for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, this series, I think the Clippers are going to win. I think, they were one of my teams. I was with them and the Suns to make it to the conference finals. I think I'm a little more higher on the Suns. I think the Clippers will pull this out, but it just looks like it's Kawhi and Paul George and like nobody else. Like that's really difficult to win series after series with. Maybe they get there, and it's kind of like this test case to me in the NBA. Like, will only stars, like literally only stars, like even the Nets, like obviously they have the big three, but I think they have a pretty solid depth and bench. Like this team is literally Kawhi and Paul George, and that's it. And it's going to be interesting to see how far they can go on the backs of these two guys. And when you look at like the stat line, you see the 45 from Paul George. I think you got like 25 from, I think like Reggie Jackson, and then it was like Paul George with another like 20, 22, whatever. And then it was like 2, 2, 0, 6, 4. Like you just need, I think, to win a championship, in my opinion, you need more than, just like two players. And I think that's kind of how it always been. Like even with the big threes, you'd have the Ray Allen big shot with, the Heat, or, with the Warriors. They still had a really, played really well team basketball. When, you look at this Clippers team, it's just different. We'll see how it works out. And I do think it's kind of more of a test case. I think they win this series. I think the big test will come against the Jazz to see like a very team oriented, Jazz team. That's like very, obviously they have their, Donovan Mitchell, scorer. They have Mike Conley, very good team, but I think they play well as a team against these two stars. It'll be interesting to see, how that dynamic works out and who would win that series. Cause to me, this Clippers team it's like two guys. I don't know how it's going to work out. It'll be really interesting.
Yeah, also, I would say with the Clippers, first off, actually, let me move over to the Mavericks real quick. Kristaps, terrible. All right, he's averaging 12.4 points a game.
Trade him.
This was your supermax superstar. I feel bad for Luka, honestly, that this is the guy that has to, play with him. I feel like if Dallas was going to win this series, it was going to have to happen in Game 6, Kawhi in a Game 7. We saw what he did with the Raptors a few years ago. The Clippers aren't that likable to me. I don't know why. I just have a feeling they're going to take this series. And, Luka, who's like averaging 35 points a game in this series, he didn't really play that well in Game 6. He had 29 points, but it was only 11 to 24 and 2 and 9 from behind the arc. So I'm very excited for this Game 7. I think it should be a good one. These are two teams I'm not really super passionate about. I do think that also the Suns, now that I said before, whoever won, Suns or Lakers, that was a team to beat in the West. And I do think now it'll be the Suns. But that'll be interesting to see also with the Suns and Nuggets. But speaking of the Suns, let's talk a little bit about the two guys really who in the playoffs have kind of had, there are a few guys, but two guys that really stand out are Devin Booker and Damian Lillard. Of course, Devin Booker is moving on with his Suns, who we've kind of talked about a little bit here. And then Damian Lillard, of course, is going home. We've mentioned how his head coach was fired and maybe a trade to the Knicks and all that stuff. So I want to start off with Devin Booker, who, him and the Suns and Chris Paul took care of business against the Lakers. Obviously, we said already. But, he went off in Game 6. I wish he went to Game 7. Dropping 47. He's great from behind three. Just an amazing series. Your thoughts on Devin Booker? Is he? Let's start off with Andrew. Is he one of these stars? Is he top 5 player in the game? Top 10 player in the game? Not top 5, I don't think. But where would you put him right now?
Top 10 would be, I think. That's I think more of the argument. He's not top 5. But like the thing with Devin Booker, I think when the bright lights come on, when they shine on him, he plays better, and that's something that it's hard to find. And I think that he's the guy that if the game's on the line, he'll take the last shot, and he's got a lot of confidence to make that shot. And I think that's kind of what makes the Suns more dangerous in a way than maybe some other teams, because, they have the vets, they have, a guy like Chris Paul, you go through all the bench and all their players. They have a young guy, young big man in DeAndre Ayton, who's, coming into his own, obviously still growing. Then you have Devin Booker, who's growing into this star and just this apex player that I want the ball at the end of the game to take big shots. And again, I think that fits really well with this Suns team. If you're ranking him in like best player, and I think it's kind of yet to be seen. We'll see how far this Suns team goes. But right now he is, I think, around that top 10. I think it really depends on how, he keeps on playing in the playoffs. But I feel like with him, when he's in these must-win games, in these, games that mean a lot, his game's elevated. And that's something that I think you can't say about every single player. And, we'll see, hopefully, he can continue to have this success moving forward. But I really enjoy watching him play. I really enjoy watching the Suns team play. So obviously my Knicks are out. So, I mean, I'm rooting for this Suns team. Like, I really like the way that, the chemistry, the team makeup, I think it's solid.
I agree. No, the Suns are a lot of fun to watch. I think Devin Booker, especially when you look at last year in the bubble, when they went 8-0,
yeah.
Of course, a lot of people forgot about that because they were unable to make the playoffs. I mean, literally, if in order to make the playoffs, they would have had to have gone 8-0, and I believe the Trailblazers would have had to have lost a few games that they ended up winning. But the Suns ran the table. They did about as well as they could have by going down to the Orlando bubble. So now they come back this year. They add a guy in Chris Paul, who, as you can, just looking at the evidence, he turns around almost any franchise he goes to. You saw what he did on the Thunder. There's that graphic or that screenshot of him warming up, I think, in like a preseason game with the Thunder, and it said like 0.2% chance that the team makes the playoffs. And of course they made the playoffs. So Chris Paul is obviously a game changer. And when you bring him into a young team with a core of Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and a number of great pieces around them, of course they're going to do well. They finish at the 2 seed. They take care of business against the Lakers. And I think Devin Booker, especially to Andrew's point, his confidence, you can really see, especially for a player as young as him. I mean, you can sort of see, like, I don't know if calling it the Mamba mentality is that far. I know he had a relationship with Kobe back in the day. And I think Booker said something along the lines of, like, he felt like he was in the building that night, game 6, when he dropped, 47 points. So you can just see that he took a lot of inspiration from the late, great Kobe Bryant, his confidence, his killer instinct, and just his will to win the game. So again, Devin Booker, love to watch him. Can't wait to see what he does later on in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think also, you guys mentioned it, like, this is his first, playoff appearance, and the fact that he's already taking over. And it's like funny, to compare Devin Booker to like Julius, Randle, like his first playoff. Like, obviously Devin Booker is a much better player, much better shooter, but like two guys first like true playoff appearances, and like Julius is like lost out there. He wants the ball, like chucks up a brick, versus Devin Booker is just like locked in. It's like, it's kind of interesting to compare the two guys and see how, like, it's like some guys can thrive under pressure, some guys can't. It looks like Devin Booker's one of those guys. And of course, another one who we already knew could thrive under pressure, and that's Damian Lillard, who of course, just went off for the Blazers in this series, especially in games. What was it? They ended up winning in game 6. So game 5, he had that amazing game. He dropped 55. Despite the effort, they still lost in overtime, which is just a killer. And then by the time game 6 came around, he was kind of spent. But just Damian Lillard has just shown in this game, he's one of the best players in the game. In the series against the Nuggets, he's one of the best players in the league. And, to watch him, just another guy that was just so locked in, just automatic, it just.
He's always locked in the playoffs.
He's always locked in the playoffs, but he just continues to prove it time and time again. But, now the question sort of is, well, first off, how would you assess his performance? And number 2, like, the question is, where does he go from here? They fired Terry Stotts. Do they bring a new coach? Dame has said that he's committed to the Blazers, but is there a trade in the works? Brij, what do you think?
A lot to break down here. And I think, first of all, with the coach going out, Dame playing at a level like just unbelievable level. I mean, 55 points in one of those games. He was going off. But yesterday he dropped an interesting post on Instagram. He was quoting Nipsey Hussle. And this is the quote. He said, "How long should I stay dedicated? How long till opportunity meet preparation?" Maybe that's hinting at him on the way out of the Blazers. Maybe it's him saying, and I know in the past he said that he's committed. He doesn't want to be like other players who, ring chase or leave his franchise. He was, he's loyal to Portland, but I think after so many years, and, he's a young player, still reasonably young compared to older guys, but, he's getting older, and I don't think, if you're from his perspective, I don't want to call it waste, but doesn't really want to just, spend in the next 5 years just being mediocre having a mediocre team in Portland when he can potentially maybe be a number 1 or number 2 option on a championship team elsewhere. And, you mentioned the Knicks, could they possibly trade for him? The Garden would be pretty electric if they brought in a star like Dame. I don't know what the trade package would look like, but it would definitely include a number of young stars. The Knicks would definitely have to give up a lot, but should they be willing to do that? I don't know yet. It is super early. The such limited playoff experience for these Knicks, and we did see that the lights were a bit too bright. Maybe you run it back for another season and see, can they have that same success and then maybe go deeper in the playoffs? But again, this is not a Knicks segment. This is a Dame segment. So Dame, again, played really well, but it's unfortunate that the rest of his team, although okay, he's not, it's not built to win a championship.
Yeah, I mean, it's Dame time, he's one of those guys that has that. I mean, like we were talking about Devin Booker, but I think it's another level with him. And it's sad that he'll never win a championship with the Blazers. I don't think it's ever going to come to fruition. So I think he's going to have to go out of there to get it. I mean, if he goes to the Knicks, I think even if you had a trade, like he has that it factor, in my opinion. And I think also, like, if he was a star in New York, I think it kind of takes him to that next level just for being in New York. And that's something against Portland, but it's extremely small market. They play on the West Coast. Like, no one's staying up to watch, Portland Trailblazers games in the middle of the season. So, like, I feel like you only really hear of him dropping 50 in the playoffs, really, in these big games. And I don't know. I think that obviously the Knicks would have to give up extreme amount of talent. Anybody who's going to acquire him is going to have to give up a lot of talent, but he's one of those guys. I mean, he is 30, which is, I mean, like, he's not, I don't think, like, you'd have to be ready to win. He'd be that final piece. He'd be that, if the Nets got Harden, like, that's your last move. That's your third or second star that you add. I don't know if the Knicks are in that position, and I don't know if Dame's quite willing to leave yet. I think he probably at this point will see who they hire. So maybe it's more of a next year thing down the road, see what the Knicks get this year, or any team. I mean, obviously we're going to talk about the Knicks because we're in New York, but I kind of feel like this is going to be, Dame maybe one more year. You'll see what the Blazers do. Maybe they add around him. But right now, I just feel like he's not going to win a title in Portland. I don't think that, he's been really good for a while, and they really haven't done much to add around him. And at a certain point, when LeBron's in the conference, the Clippers and Kawhi and all these young stars with Booker, and, you have Jokic and, guys just really, I mean, around the league, Doncic, everybody, you have so many stars. Like, he's going to, I think, either have to get built around with the Blazers or he's going to leave. And I think he's going to end up leaving.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I love about Dame is that he's so committed, or has been so committed, to staying with the Blazers, winning there. And just like in a league where everyone is a ring chaser, that they'll go anywhere to win a title. The fact that he's one of these old school guys that's like, no, I'm going to do it here, it makes him that much more likable. But I can't blame him if he's trying to go somewhere else.
That was like Melo with the Knicks. Everyone was like, "Oh, he'll stay with the Knicks. Like, that's great." And then it soured out.
Yeah.
Well, Melo kind of just wanted money, but that's besides the point. Anyway, in terms of Dame, amazing player. Let's see what happens in the offseason. As we wrap up our NBA segment, we got a couple minutes left here in the show. Just want to briefly touch on the Hawks. My question is, we saw what the Knicks. Can they make a series with the Sixers? Can they do any damage? Andrew, your thoughts?
Not if Embiid can play. If Embiid's even like 50% healthy, I don't think that they're going to really make this much of a big series. If Embiid doesn't play, I think it will be a battle, and I could see it probably going either way. The Hawks probably would end up, just because I think Trae Young really is taking that next step in his progression. But right now, like the Knicks, there was an overachieving team to start that, you had the best player not play well at all, which was probably even beyond the Hawks defense that I think was also on Julius Randle. I don't know. I just don't see, this Hawks team beating the Sixers. I think the Sixers should make kind of quick work of this Hawks team, maybe in 5 or 6 if Embiid plays. I think it could go deeper if Embiid doesn't, but I don't see the Hawks making more noise.
Yeah, I agree. I think it all depends on the health of Joel Embiid. And even if he's not healthy, as Trae Young likes to call it, the A, they might win a game there, but I think it's going to be 5, maybe 6 games. The Sixers will win it, and they'll face ultimately the Nets in the conference finals.
Yeah. Look, the Hawks, first of all, Trae Young is now maybe my most, it used to be Steph for a while because Steph used to annoy me. I know that's controversial, and everyone loves Steph, but because as a LeBron guy, Steph used to be my most hated player.
He's the nemesis.
Trae Young now is my most hated player in the NBA. I'm not going to throw any popcorn on him or anything, but I would love to see the Sixers just embarrass the Hawks. He's just so unlikable
Yeah,
and
I'd like
so
that.
like arrogant. Like it's like the Knicks, like, oh, I wish it was the 90s and like he could have charged down the lane and Patrick Ewing or Anthony Mason or somebody could just foul them hard,
Tackle
whatever.
him.
But whatever, it's that's not the game anymore. But I think as long as you guys, like you guys said, as long as Joel's healthy, I think even without him, I mean, Ben Simmons and all that, but I think the Sixers should be able to take care of business. And I don't know, Eastern Conference Finals, it looks like it'll be Nets Sixers. But with all that being said, it is time to wrap up the show. A special thank you to our guest, former Mets and Yankees head strength and conditioning coach, Jeff Mangold. If you missed any part of tonight's show, you can check out the highlights or the entirety of the program on WFUV Sports YouTube page and also on WFUVsports.org. The sports director at WFUV is Bobby Chaffardini. Thank you to our fearless producer, Mr. Alex Bowles. For Andrew Gulata, Brij Gotham with the headlines, I'm Michael Legan. One on One is a production of WFUV Sports.